Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting of Monday, June 26, 2023. I now call the meeting to order, and I will ask the Vice Chair to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Vice Chair Toller. And a roll call, please.
Chair Arith,
Present.
Vice Chair Toller,
here.
Commissioner Rojas,
Present.
Commissioner Zick,
Here.
Commissioner Andrade,
Here.
Commissioner Vivar.
Present.
Right, thank you, Anna. This brings us to announcements and presentations. We have none this evening, so we'll move on to public comments. These are for matters not listed on the agenda. Public comments will be heard, and I will now open up the public comment. If you'd like to speak, please come to the podium. Yes, Ms. McDonald, you may start.
Good evening, Cynthia McDonald, Costa Mesa resident. This weekend, I attended an event for our Neighborhood Voices initiative. There were many, many mayors, city council members, planning commissioners at the meeting. Most of them were from the LA area, but a few folks from Orange County. I was disappointed to not see anyone from Costa Mesa. The initiative, which is available on their website, would restore local control over planning matters. I'm sure each of you asked to join the Planning Commission because you believe that the city having control over these matters is beneficial. The laws that have been passed the last few years chip away at that power. What if Sacramento takes away our voices on housing and then they go after cannabis shops? Are we willing to give up control over that? If so, we'll have one on every corner and the shopping centers in between, and never mind how close they are to schools. Democracy begins with we the people. And we the people want to preserve our spot at the table on planning issues. The polls have proved it. Not only are cities and leaders supporting their initiative, but also organizations such as the Southern California Association of Governments, of which we're a member. I urge everyone to check out our neighborhoodvoices.com. The initiative will be filed with the Attorney General next week, and signature gathering will begin shortly thereafter. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Yes, Ms. Simone?
So I made a lovely presentation for you guys today because I'm a visual person too. So next, it's about the Gym 12. Next. So this is actually the wall that's facing us. I think my 2-year-old grandson could put together a wall better. I think that's a trash compactor next to all the trash. Is that accurate? So this used to be a door that opened, and apparently this is the appropriate way to fix it. Next. So there's the door that is in discussion. Completely fire safety. Does it not look like a fire safety door? Next. So this is a special occasion, about 6 a.m. One of the instructors just opened the door and said, "Good morning!" 6 a.m., what a great awakening. As you can see on the lower left, the fan is in the door as usual. Next. There's a better image. This is how close I am to the gym. This is actually taken from my property. You can still see the fan in the door. Next. Oh, look at that, another fan in the door. Next. Oh. Now there, if you look behind the fan, you'll see somebody bending over. Next. Oh, now they're standing up. It's kind of like they're having a workout with the door open. And if you look at that door, it has a do not enter sign, emergency exit only. So is that door supposed to be propped open like that? According to your code enforcement, it's perfectly acceptable. Next. More working out. Next. There's the door. I tried to get a better picture of the sign for you guys. Next. The door open again. Next. Okay, so low frequencies actually penetrate a wall easier than high frequencies. Next. The chest vibrates to low bass tones because they match the resonance frequency of the chest. Next. Frequent exposure to low frequency noise can cause a variety of negative, let me repeat that, negative effects such as headaches, increased heart rate, anxiety, vertigo, and fatigue. Next, frequent intensity and rate may increase with human emotions because of the carrying biological significant information. Next, strong low frequency sounds has always signaled danger. So they signal danger, but yet we are exposed to them every day for hours. Hours. Next. Oh, an increased amount of noise can actually throw your heartbeat out of rhythm, causing irregular heartbeat, blood clot, stroke, and even heart failure. And you guys are letting us be exposed to this on the daily. Next. Just high frequencies can cause two types of effects. It can make you go deaf, or it can cause headache, fatigue, dizziness, and nausea. Next. So whenever you went and talked to the gym, Mr. Zilch, did they feel dominant, powerful, and in control? Because I do not want to feel that way every day. I just want to feel like an everyday citizen.
Thank you, Ms. Simo. Ms. Spadoni. Good evening.
Council and planning, can't you do something to help those neighbors? Is there nothing the city can do? Is that how you want to live at your home? This just breaks my heart that they have no peace of mind in their own home, their castle. I'm shocked that you cannot do something. She's done everything she's supposed to do. She's called code enforcement. She's come to council meetings. She's come to planning, and nothing has changed for these neighbors. She's not the only one. She's just the one that's has enough tenacity to get up here and speak. But that's not why I was here tonight. But this is really upsetting to see her every week, and this problem never rectified. I'd like to just reiterate what Cynthia McDonald was saying regarding ourneighborhoodvoices.com. Go on that site. You'll see the initiative. It is finished. It's supposed to be filed approximately before July 3rd. It's going to affect every city in the state of California, North, Central, Southern. If you read this week, you saw that Santa Ana, which I think everybody would agree is a very liberal city, are now questioning the issues, the RENA numbers, and what's going on. So many cities now, when the reality is hitting them in the face, are wondering, how is this going to come to pass with no other type of infrastructure consideration, any public transportation? It's sort of idiocy at its very top. I would like to see the city of Costa Mesa, although they are represented by SCAG, and SCAG is on board with this, put their 2 cents in with some type of issue agreeing with this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spadoni. Anyone else in chambers wish to speak? A public comment? All right, Anna, do we have anyone online or on the telephone?
Yes, we do, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Hank Castanelli, you may provide your public comment.
Mr. Castanetti?
Hi, good evening, Commission. Please excuse me, I have laryngitis, and so I apologize for my raspy voice. I'll keep it real simple. I wanted to speak a number of times before the Commission. I never thought that anything that happened at the train club was relevant to what you guys oversee. And I realized recently that, you're enfranchised to deal with land use. Well, I would like to suggest that one of the best land uses in the entire city of Costa Mesa is the 40 acres of Fairview Park that the Orange County model engineers use to operate the Mackerel Flats Junction Railroad. In May, we gave 3,342 rides to the public, free rides. Every third weekend, we're open to the public for free rides. Last month, we did over 3,400 rides. We're on track right now to break all records this year. We've done over 3,000 rides every month this year. And we've been trying to tally through historical records some of our figures. Since 2002, the club has given 530,741 free rides. We are actually we're a destination. We're a regional destination now. In addition, our volunteers so far this year have donated 2,546 hours to the city of Costa Mesa. They have to fill out time cards for all the time they spend it, and we consider those donations to the city. So I'd just like to say, please, if anyone out there would like to join us on the third weekend of every month, come on by 10 to 3:30, and they're always free. In addition, if you'd like to participate, come and join us. Anybody is welcome. Anybody that is open to the public, come on by ocmetrains.org, and you can sign up. You can see everything we do, and join the club. So thanks so much for allowing me to speak on behalf of the Orange County Model Engineers tonight, and thank you for all you people do. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Castanetti, and give our best to Diane, please. Is there anyone else, Anna?
No, there's not, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you. That brings us to Planning Commissioner comments and suggestions, and I'll go ahead and open it up if anyone wants to jump in, starting with Commissioner Vivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Castanetti, thanks for joining us, and I hope you feel better soon. My time's up.
You can keep going.
And thank you to all the members of the public who are here tonight and watching online as well. Thank you all for your participation. I just have a couple questions. I'm not sure if whether staff might be able to answer either of these two questions now or later. One of them I think is for Mr. Yang, and I'm just wondering about the roundabouts on, gosh, I forgot the street name, Meyer. Yeah, because I walk past there a couple times a week, and I just realized they were gone all of a sudden when I walked by there last week on Friday. So I'm just wondering whether they were removed because they'll be made permanent, or maybe there was some other reasoning for their removal. And so that's the first thing I'm wondering about. And the second, and I'm not sure if, again, maybe Scott or Mr. Drapkin or Ms. Lee might be able to answer this, is I think that it's been at least 6-7 months since we reviewed at least some Measure Q cannabis applications, which were conditioned to be heard by the Planning Commission 6 months after they started operation. And so I'm just wondering when those items might come back to us for review per that condition that was added. And that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Vivar. Commissioner Rojas? Okay, thanks. Commissioner Zick?
Thank you. Well, I hadn't intended to make comments, but, and I'm sorry that Ms. Samoa has left. Maybe she'll watch this back when she gets home. You know, every now and then we have residents come forward and speak about a problem that they have, whether it's in their neighborhood or with an application or whatever it might be. And every time that occurs, I take it seriously. I think everyone up here listens to resident concerns and takes them seriously. She's been here many times. She's been in front of the city council many times. And every time she does that, I can't help but think that there has to be a solution to the problem that she has. I'm upset that we have a resident that's upset. And I share her frustration that I haven't been able to help find a resolution that satisfies her and yet is a solution within the city's authority and control. She intimated that I have spoken to the gym and wondered about that conversation. I have not spoken to the gym. All of the work that I've done, all of the conversations that I've had, all the correspondence that I've been involved in has been simply with staff, because it's their job, their charter, to to work on things that are within the city's responsibility. I've received documentation from staff on what the original conditions of approval are. I've followed the concerns that Wendy has articulated. I understand all the work that staff has done to try to understand to what extent there is a problem, to what extent they have the levers and leverage to implement a solution. So I'm well aware of that situation, but I share frustration that a resident's problem still has not been solved to their satisfaction. So I simply wanted to say that. I'm not done working on this issue. I'm not done being concerned about this issue, but I recognize the challenge that staff has had trying to find a solution that actually is a effective solution within their purview. Second subject that I wanted to comment on is our neighborhood voices. So I've followed this when it first started up, because like a lot of organizations and a lot of initiatives and a lot of these sorts of things, people will come up with names that may not be as transparent to what they're all about. You know, the Motherhood and Apple Pie organization, and maybe they're all about doing something that's going to hurt people. But that isn't the case with our neighborhood voices. And it's pretty clear to me that they're out to do exactly what has been talked about from a couple of the members of the public, which is return local land use decisions to the cities where the people are, where city staff is, and return that from the Sacramento legislatures who are passing all kinds of laws that apply to all cities regardless of their circumstances, regardless of their priorities, regardless of their needs. So to me, it's just common sense. And from the number of people and official representation from all the different cities and organizations throughout the state, it's clear to me that my assessment of what this organization is all about is as straightforward and common sense as has been represented. So I simply have one question to follow all that up, and that is a question to our own staff. And that is, do we have any intention whatsoever as a city to make a statement or take a formal action relative to the effort that our neighborhood voices is engaged in? I know that when it came to Measure X, Measure Q, Measure K, the city has taken formal action, putting statements and information out to the public, ostensibly to inform them of the issues involved so they could make informed decisions. So I'm wondering, again, is our city staff undertaking any effort whatsoever to consider making a statement or take formal action on our neighborhood voices? That's the end of my comments, but that's my question.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Zick. Commissioner Andrade, any comments this evening? Okay. Vice Chair.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to everybody that came and spoke. I don't have a whole lot of commentary on that tonight, but I appreciate staying up to speed with those sorts of things and keep coming back and letting us know what's going on with that. I did want to give a shout out to everybody that made the fish fry possible. I was there every day. It was a huge success. The weather was beautiful. So shout out to the Lions Club and staff that made that happen. There were a lot of people out and about, obviously. A lot of people got there on bikes, on foot. I talked to a lot of them. I did speak to one person who lives right off Myers Circle, and I may as well just share her thoughts on that. She told me a few things, that she loved them. She wished they would be made permanent and a little more nice looking. They needed one more between the two, and in tandem with those traffic circles, they needed to do something about people parking on the corners, which blocks visibility for safe crossing. So those seem reasonable to me. I thought that was good feedback. I thought I'd share just because Commissioner Vivar brought it up. Speaking of those sorts of things, biking, Fairview Road, where we are right now, they're going to have a public meeting here at City Hall on Wednesday night at 6 p.m. We're going to be talking about future improvements to the street regarding bike lanes. So Wednesday night, 6 p.m. here at City Hall. Come tell everybody what you think about the plans for that. That's it.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And I have no comments this evening, so we'll go ahead and move on to the consent calendar. We have 4 consent calendar items this evening. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the Planning Commission staff or the public request specific items to be discussed or removed from the consent calendar for discussion. Items removed from the consent calendar will be discussed and voted upon immediately following Planning Commission action on the remainder of the consent calendar. And I'll go ahead and make it known that I'd like to pull consent calendar item number 3.
I'd like to pull number 4.
And pull number 4. Okay. So moving on to the balance, commissioners, do you have any comments or questions on, and I'll go ahead and read them out, the unofficial meeting minutes for November 14th, 2022, and unofficial meeting minutes for May 22 of 2023. Commissioner Bovar?
No, I just wanted to make a motion to approve, but
Okay.
I think we're not at that step yet.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. If you want to go ahead and make the motion. I take it your motion was to approve?
Yeah, approve the balance, which are the 2 sets of meeting minutes as is.
Okay. Consent calendar items number 1 and 2. Is there a second? I think your name popped. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'll go ahead and second that. I have no comments. Do you have any further comments, Commissioner Bovar?
No, sir, nothing.
Okay, neither do I. Anna, if we could bring it up for the vote. Thanks.
That motion carries 6-0.
All right, thank you. And if we could, let's go ahead and start with item number 4, if we could. And then we'll move on to number 3. So Commissioner Zick.
Thank you. I simply had a question, and I guess I had to pull it in order to ask my question. So I don't recall, and maybe staff can help me with my memory on this, the only other denial I can recall, specifically with regard to cannabis, was the location on Bristol. What I don't recall is whether the denial resolution was on a subsequent Planning Commission agenda consent calendar. It was?
No, your memory serves you correct. Again, Commissioner Zick, with regards to the Bristol Street project, you may or may not recall that there was it actually wasn't the Bristol Street project, it was another project on a harbor where there was a denial. And the attorneys representing denial had mentioned that there was a conflict because the commission never really saw or reviewed, for that matter, the denial resolution. So basically what staff does, and most other cities and the city has done in the past, is take what the Planning Commission says or indicates in the meeting, recites that in a resolution, and then under an appeal situation, we would bring it to denial for City Council. So normally that would occur, but at that time, that attorney kind of mentioned that there might be potential conflict in that. We spoke to the city attorney. The city attorney suggested that maybe we proceed in this process instead, give the commission a chance to approve it on the consent calendar. But basically what that is in front of you from perspective of the consent calendar item number 4 is a representation of what the commission indicated in their conclusions with regards to the denial.
And I'm totally fine with that. There was a denial on Bristol. It was the one that was adjacent to Masters Circle.
There was a denial. That one was dropped, though, by the applicant.
Okay, but whether What do you mean it was dropped?
So the appeal that they eventually submitted in.
So is this process of putting the denial on a subsequent consent calendar only apply to denials that have been appealed? Or to any denial?
It would be for any denials, but the Bristol Street came before the other one that we had in Harbor where the attorney brought up the issue. So that one was sort of predated that one. There's also been plenty of other denials that have occurred actually, and we're not going to bring forward either.
Okay, so in the future, any denial will be on a subsequent Planning Commission consent calendar, regardless of whether it's appealed.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Zick. And I'll go ahead and just jump in for a second. If I could, Director Lee or Director Dropkin, if you'd like to weigh in. That this resolution is not to amend any of the previous votes. If there were commissioners here who did not approve of the motion, this is just to approve the form under which the findings were made. So it's to say these are the findings that our colleagues made along the way. Is that true, Director Dropkin?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's all for me. Anyone else? All right, seeing none. Let's go ahead and bring that up for a motion. Motion made by Commissioner Zick. What's your motion, Commissioner?
To approve the item.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Toller. Would you like to speak to your motion, Commissioner Zick?
No, thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair?
Nope.
All right, let's bring it up.
That motion carries 6-0.
All right, thank you, Anna. That moves us on to consent calendar item number 3, which is the 2021-2022 annual review of the Costa Mesa 2015 to 2035 general plan. I think I'll go ahead and open this up for public comments. Is that correct, Director Dropkin? Or would we like a presentation from staff, or how would you like to?
We do have a presentation that we can provide and just work with it through the normal procedure of public.
Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Thank you.
Yvonne's here to give a presentation. It'll be a PowerPoint, and Justin's also here to assist. We also have some other staff that are available to respond to questions when we get to that point in the hearing.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I guess we'll turn it over to Ms. Paivon and Mr. Arias. Take it away.
Thank you, Planning Commissioners. Paivon, Netherlands C, here to present on the General Plan Annual Progress Report. An overview of what the General Plan Annual Progress Report is. It provides a summary of actions taken by the city during a calendar year to implement the city's general plan programs, policies. This includes the implementation of the city's housing element. This report is required to be reviewed and accepted by the City Council before it is submitted to the appropriate state departments. It provides an overview of the general plan consistency with the Office of Planning and Research General Plan guidelines and highlights city actions that have occurred. Housing, Community and Development Department, Housing Element Annual Progress Report forms. They are static forms that the city fills out. It summarizes the status of how the city achieves its regional housing needs assessment allocation. Also the status of various housing development. This includes review of applications, building permits, and construction of housing. Also provides status of implementing the housing element programs. This annual progress report covers the calendar years 2021 and 2022. Table 1 provides a summary of how the general plan is implemented for both years. Attachment 1 is the 2021 summary of the final year of the 5th cycle housing element implementation. The 2022 is attachment 2, summarizes the first year of implementation of the 6th cycle housing element. So the actions that are taken by the city that implements the general plan goals and policies, includes appropriation of funds, how the city pursues grant opportunities, community outreach, updates to ordinances, capital improvements plans, or projects, and how we implement or approve discretionary project. So as shown through various city actions and approved projects that are summarized in Table 1, the city general plan serves as an effective guiding documents for development, preservation, and conservation of open space and natural resources, and efficient expenditure of public funds. Note that future general plan updates will be necessary to implement the sixth cycle housing element to ensure that general plan remains internally consistent and remain an effective guiding documents for orderly growth. This includes updates to address environmental justice and include reference to recently adopted local hazard mitigation plan. Moving on to the housing element APR, for calendar 2021, the city issued 74 building permits for housing units and 90 housing units completed construction. The table breaks down by housing type, how many building permits were issued and were completed for that calendar year. For the fifth cycle housing element, RENA allocation, planning period, which included 2 lower income units, the city accommodated is what was allocated to it. For that planning period, the city issued 1,232 housing development building permits, and 73 of which fell into the affordable categories. The city approved 35 housing development applications that comprise of 5 or more residential units for a total of 2,911 housing units. Moving on to calendar 2022, the city issued 75 building permits for housing units and completed construction for 38. Again, there's a breakdown of based on housing type. For the sixth cycle housing element, the city was allocated 11,760 total units. From October 15, 2021 to December 31st, 2022, the city issued 89 residential units, of which includes 79 affordable units and 10 above moderate income units. All 79 affordable units were accessory dwelling units. And so far, for the sixth cycle, the city has not approved any new housing development with 5 or more residential units. Program implementation status for 2021, the city has progressed and had continued to progress towards completing all programs including local efforts to remove constraints to the maintenance, improvements, and development of housing. For the fifth cycle, there were 16 programs. For the sixth cycle, we have over 47 housing programs with various completion timeframes within this 8-year planning period. We have started updating or drafting the inclusionary housing ordinance. We have helped mobile home rehabilitation. And for the Fairview Development Center specific plan, we released the request for proposal to start that work in June 13, 2023. And we have completed the ADU ordinance update. In summary, the city general plan continues to serve as an effective guide for orderly growth and development. Future general plan review and updates are in the works to occur in the next few years to accommodate RENA obligations and address various state land use planning goals. The next step is for City Council review, and we anticipate taking this to City Council July 18th, 2023. Staff welcomes any comments Planning Commissioner may have, and we could modify the APR as necessary or advised. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Ms. Paivon. Since I pulled the item this evening, I'll go ahead and take a first swing. I have probably about 20 questions, but don't let that scare you. I think a lot of these are just for clarification and for updates, and we can work expeditiously through them. You're welcome to make short answers out of it if you can. So let's go ahead and turn to page 10 of the agenda report. And you'll notice Fairview Developmental Center RFP. Is there a chance that we can get a copy of that for review at some point very soon?
Yes, it's currently posted on Planet Bid,
Okay.
and we could provide that to Planning Commission.
Okay, great. Thank you. If we turn to page 11, under Project Home Key, I was looking at the funding for this, $10 million in funds for 48 units. It comes out to, what, approximately $500,000 per unit. Was it ever conceived of that, how could I put this? I guess the question is, why is it so much per unit? And are there funds that are going to keep this project going long-term, or do we have to continue going out and soliciting funds to keep Project Home Key afloat?
Yeah, I think I could better provide that information at a subsequent hearing or meeting, I should say.
Okay.
I could speak with our project manager expert with that. I could get some good details for that.
Okay. And was there ever an analysis that was done on the loss of revenue from the transient tax from it being a hotel versus what we would get as a city for participating in the Project Home Key program?
I'm not aware of any analysis, but I could also add that to the questions. Maybe
Okay.
Ms. Lee has an answer for that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's more academic than anything,
Right.
but still very interesting. Yes, Director Lee.
Sure, I'll just add a little context. Obviously, the council carefully reviewed Project Home Key and the city's participation when they decided to move forward. We're all aware that it was previously a motel. They do pay TOT. There is a fiscal impact analysis that goes forward with every council item, but we'll be happy to look into this a little more with our finance department and also our neighborhood improvement manager, who's the project lead on this.
Yeah, just in case our finance director has a little bit of extra time on her hands, which I know she doesn't, she's welcome to provide that information. Thank you, Director Lee. If we go ahead and move on to the annual review, page 6, land use 1.3. Says, strongly encourage the development of residential uses and owner-occupied housing, so single-family detached residences, condominiums, townhouses, where feasible, to improve the balance between rental and ownership housing opportunities. It's my understanding that as far as housing stock in Costa Mesa, it's approximately 60% renters. So if this land use policy is calling for more of a balance, it kind of insinuates to me that we should be focusing on single-family homes or ownership opportunities instead to strike that balance. I don't know how staff interprets that land use policy.
Yes, absolutely. That's the intent of that.
Okay, thank you, Director. Let's go ahead and move on to page 8, land use policy 2.6. Encourage increased private market investment in declining or deteriorating neighborhoods. I guess I didn't know exactly what that meant or how the city is approaching that land use policy. I don't know if you can shed some light on that, please.
Yeah, so the city staff meets with property owners and potential developers on a consistent basis to discuss potential housing project. We also do anticipate, as part of the housing implementation programs and community visioning exercise for key commercial and industrial corridors, the outcome will provide standards and processes to streamline entitlement process in key areas. This process will include community to ensure that their needs are addressed as the communities are redeveloped. So this process and our effort towards it will be noted as part of the next APR.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Paivon. I appreciate that. If we turn to, well, you don't have to turn to, but you can turn to page 199 if you want. And I was kind of taking a tally of, let me turn to 199. I was taking a tally of the bikeways and pedestrian paths, or I guess it would just be the majority of the goals in the circulation element. And I counted 101 that pertain to bikeability and walkability, with the lion's share of them being recommendations. And I was, I guess, curious on two fronts. One, is there any way to consolidate this so it's not so long? Number two, why are they standing as recommendations? Are we just waiting for approval from City Council for many of these, or what? I know we have Mr. Brett Atencio in the crowd too.
Good evening, commissioners, chair.
Hey.
I think that certainly hear you on that, and I think that really this came from when the ATP, the Active Transportation Plan, there was a lot of pieces in the circulation element that were not up to date, definitions, et cetera. And there was also a lot of changes that were called for in the Active Transportation Plan that were added to the circulation element at that time.
Okay.
That's why the onerous amount of definitions.
Okay. Yeah, I know that our Active Transportation Committee is one of the most vigorous and dedicated groups that we have in the city, and they're involved in all the interstitial spaces, so to speak, and they do make quite a splash. I'm just wondering if a lot of this is just to, like you said, clarify the definitions, or if it's really to kind of encircle a lot of everything that has to do with circularity within our community.
Yeah.
So,
yes, absolutely.
okay, thank you, Mr. Brett Atencio. I think maybe one of my other colleagues will call you back up, but I think I'm good right now. Thank you. Let's go ahead and turn back to page 8, Land Use Policy 2.8. And it says, limit building height for 4 stories above grade south of the 405, except for special purpose housing such as elderly, affordable, or student housing, unless otherwise approved by a general plan amendment. A 4-story, 5-level parking structure with rooftop parking on the 5th level is considered a 4-story structure. In any of the potential large-scale housing developments that we're looking at, has it ever been considered to underground the parking instead of keeping it above ground so that we retain that space above ground?
Yeah, certainly undergrounding parking is a development type that we suggest to applicants when they process developments. One problem with Costa Mesa is that the water table is extremely high. So we've had problems with that in the past. In fact, I've gone through a modification recently on a project that for a larger development hotel that had the same problem, and they've had to raise their floor levels up. So yeah, that becomes an issue.
Okay, all right, thank you, Director Dropkin. Let's go ahead and move on to page 9, Land Use Policy 3.1. It says, protect existing stabilized residential neighborhoods, including mobile home parks and manufactured housing parks, from the encroachment of incompatible or potentially disruptive land uses or activities. And I think I wanted a little bit of clarification on what it means to protect those neighborhoods from X or Y encroachment of an incompatible use. I just wanted to leave it out there generally, just for an example, if you will.
I mean, certainly one example would be the way staff reviews projects and applies conditions for certain development that's nearby residential areas. We've done that in obviously multiple projects that have gone in front of the Planning Commission. And but going back to your question, could you ask that question just one more time so I could respond to it more specifically?
Yeah, I think it was.
It was LU 3.1,
what
right?
type, LU 3.1, which is the encroachment of incompatible use, and what would be an example of what you would do to protect those neighborhoods?
Yeah, I think where I was going was probably the correct path. Just basically conditioning projects as they get near residential areas. That might be a good example of one.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Director. Let's go ahead and move on to 3.7, LU 3.7. Promote the development design flexibility that encourages older and poorly maintained high-density residential uses to be rehabilitated. So if we're talking about more mature neighborhoods, let's say on West Side Costa Mesa, for example, and we're looking at rehabilitation or development or additional flexibility, what is the intent, I guess? I mean, it seems kind of clear on one hand, you want to kind of gentrify a neighborhood, bring it up to a certain standard, but is there anything in place to protect the existing residents in the effort to develop in those more highly dense residential areas? I know that some areas around the city are a little bit more sensitive to displacement. And I'm just wondering if in this land use policy, if that effort to redesign or redevelop in those neighborhoods wouldn't come at some cost. And that's just conjecture. It's just something that I've been thinking about recently.
Yeah, the intent of this policy is to work with the property owners to improve and reinvest in the property as much as possible, obviously without removing the density. And certainly, as you said, and many times with that improvement, it does come at a cost. It does increase the values sometimes of rent, which is unfortunate, but certainly that could be looked at, but it really is a marketplace situation.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Director Dropkin. Let's go ahead and turn to objective LU4A. It reads, encourage new development and redevelopment that protects and improves the quality of Costa Mesa's natural environment and resources. And it seemed, just as a working title, it seemed pretty broad.
Yeah, it is broad.
Very broad.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if it seemed a little flimsy and underdeveloped to me as far as a working title goes, because I wanted to have specifics, which are clearly when you turn the page, you can read about it. But I just wanted to kind of note that. If we go to page 10, let's skip that one. Page 11. 4.6, incorporate the principles of sustainability into land use planning, infrastructure, and development processes to reduce greenhouse gas emissions consistent with state goals. What exactly are those goals right now? I assume that South Coast Air Quality Management District has the state requirements, but what are we as a city actively doing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, meeting this policy goal?
Yeah, I think that's a question that really refers to what the building department is requiring in regards to structural review and other requirements that the state is passing down. One recent example was the potential restriction of gas ovens and things like that. However, I believe that if I was going to give a chain of these things, I'd have to speak with the building official and really get more in the context of what kind of requirements they're applying with regards to solar, with regards to the type of other heating requirements using the swimming pools. insulated windows, insulation, different structural improvements that might necessitate a different idea of development.
Okay, thank you, Director. I might actually kick this over to Mr. Yang. I'm a little bit curious. Does the Public Works Department ever cooperate with the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure, like their Envision type certification process for different public works projects around the city?
Not directly, at least not that I know of, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
For this issue, just adding on to what Mr. Drapkin was saying, that for these issues of sustainability that he was mentioning, we can also call on Ms. Salim Afewerki, who specializes in this area, and we can give you a more fulsome response with respect to this afterwards.
Yeah. At some point, it would be great to know the scope of work of what she's up to now that she's back at the city.
Correct.
So,
thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to page 11, 5.2. Strongly encourage protection and preservation of existing but underutilized school sites for future recreational, social, and educational uses. Is that something that's memorialized in an agreement with Newport Mesa Unified, or is that just the city's perspective on retaining those uses? Because I know that there are some schools around Costa Mesa that are at all-time low enrollment, and who knows what Newport Mesa Unified wants to do, but if those trends continue, I think it kind of brings up this land use policy for us a little bit.
Yeah, I'd say, Chair, that this is a strong relationship between our relationship with the school district and how ultimately school district sites are used. We have joint use agreements for recreational purposes, but certainly we're communicating all the time with our counterparts at the school district as to any available sites that might make sense for a future use that the city could promote and be involved in.
Okay. And just off the cuff, do you happen to know if they took the fence down at Harper yet?
I don't believe so. I know that the city manager is working with the school district leadership to determine sort of what's involved with that. It is a school district site, so the city has very little control over what happens on that site, but we'll certainly use our relationships with the school district to have that conversation.
Yeah, I think a lot of our east side neighbors are just chomping at the bit to get that thing taken down. So thank you. Let's go ahead and turn to page 12. Land use 5.7. Encourage new development that is organized around compact, walkable, mixed-use neighborhoods and districts to conserve open space resources, minimize infrastructure costs, and reduce reliance on the automobile. I just wanted to point that out as a matter of fact, that reducing reliance on the automobile is a policy goal of ours. Let's turn to page 13. Land Use Policy 6.5, encourage revitalization of existing older commercial industrial areas in the west side with new mixed-use development consisting of ownership housing stock and live-work units. Do we happen to know if there's any design on building? I mean, I'm taking a look at Placentia with those kind of shotgun-style homes. I'm not sure if, I know that all of them aren't live-work, but I think some of them may be. I don't know, has that style worked out for Costa Mesa since that went in on Placentia?
I think we have had fewer of those artist live work unit proposals than we thought we originally envisioned. There has been 2 in the last several years that have gone in front of the City Council for screening, including a 5-unit and a 7-unit, as I recall.
A 5-unit, 7-unit, okay.
Yeah, so.
Great, okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to page 16, 7.1. Endeavor to create mixture of employment opportunities for all economic levels of residents and businesses. How in the world are we approaching that? It's a wonderful policy goal to hit all the economic levels. I just don't know what our approach is. Are we continuing to cooperate with the Chamber of Commerce? Are we working with the state employment agency? What exactly are we doing here?
Yeah, I think that falls into the understanding that some of these policies for the general plan are very far-reaching. And it might be an intention of it to just be stated for for the preservation of an existing project or a new project from a characteristic of what a condition could be applied to it. But moreover, this really is, and I don't want to talk in circles, but this is really just a policy or a goal, so to speak, for the city, which basically establishes that in any situation where we have that ability to sort of require such a thing, we could.
Okay.
So
I would also like to add that we are developing an economic development strategic plan that will address this policy or help us achieve this goal as well.
Yeah, I think all of us might be curious to see, how the city is approaching job creation and economic stability across the different economic levels here, because I know that, there's some economic sectors here that suffer greatly from being underdeveloped and really not focused on. So I think we'd love to see that.
And the city staff regularly attends an ICSC convention where we publicize the city with regards to trying to attract new businesses.
Is that the Las Vegas meeting?
It is.
Okay.
But we don't go there because of Las Vegas. We go there because
I go there for Las Vegas.
It's important.
Thanks, Director Grafkin. Let's go ahead and move on to page 42, 2A5. Conservation element goal. Promote environmentally sustainable development principles for buildings, master plan communities, neighborhoods, and infrastructure. I think this goes back to the conversation with Mr. Yang a little bit ago in terms of these are very broad definitions, but what exactly is being done? I know that we have a couple buildings that are recognized as LEED certified, but I think and that's great. LEED has a wonderful range of options that you could do single projects, you can bundle projects together, or if it's a public works project, you can actually go with the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure and have your whole infrastructure project, roads, bike lanes, whatever, be certified as sustainable infrastructure as well. And it accounts for the life cycle of all the materials as well.
Yeah, and for this one, we could also highlight the Green Business Project that the city has that encourage businesses to be certified.
Okay. Yeah.
Another example might be the current state requirements, which require that a certain amount of the waste for redevelopment projects be recycled. So
Yeah.
There's probably a million places where I could cite some examples for this one.
Yeah, California is super progressive, like SB 1383 is really forward thinking.
Right.
But there's a lot of other room for improvements and cost savings as well, I would argue. Thank you. Let's go ahead and move to page, looks like 55. CD 10.3, encourage adaptive reuse of existing industrial structures, which results in rehabilitated buildings with distinctive and attractive architecture. Again, going back to how are we approaching the reuse of materials as we're re-envisioning the city? I don't think anyone needs to answer that. It's all in the same vein. Where was it? Page 42. Did I miss one? Okay, I did miss one. My apologies. Page 42, conservation element 2.8.8. Continue city green initiatives and purchases of equipment and agreements that favor sustainable products and practices. Didn't we just put out a call for new vehicles in our fleet? And if so, I'm not sure exactly when. It feels like it was just in the last year that we did a new purchase for some larger items. And how many of those were electric or hybrid or highly efficient? Yes, Mr. Yang.
So Chairman Arith, you're correct. In the recent past, we purchased the electrical vehicles, Chevy Bolts, in terms of meeting this goal of green sustainability. In the recent council, I think we made a purchase for new vehicles. I don't have the inventory of the vehicles. That's managed by our maintenance services manager, Mr. Rob Ryan. But the thing is, we can find the list and get the list for you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yang. I
Sure,
appreciate
no problem.
that. Just wanted to make sure that we're moving forward. I remember a couple years ago, there was the motorcycle expo over at the fairgrounds, and I was there test riding some of the electric motorcycles, and I actually dragged PD down there with me to go check it out. So I didn't know if there's anything that they've moved on in terms of electrifying the police department fleet, but I would be really excited to see that. So anyway, neither here nor there. If we turn to page 80, the Go Green. So this is in the annual element progress report. So Ms. Paivon, is this what's being sent out to HCD or Mr. Arias?
Yes, so these are essentially pre-filled forms that the state wants us to fill in, and then we resubmit them back to the state.
Okay. So it says in that row, 2021, Go Green, to continue to offer discount on permit fees for solar panels and promote the program on city website and public counters, pursue funding to reinstate the Go Green program. And then if we go over to the status of the program, it says review of the solar panel permit fees are expedited and approved over the counter. However, discounts are not offered on permit fees. So is this still an active program? I'm not sure I saw it in 2022.
No, and it hasn't been for probably since I've been with the city.
Okay.
Yeah, so that state program has been not active for a bit of time. I think this was
So it's a
probably at
state program?
Yeah, it was through the state that you could get reimbursed essentially.
Okay. I know there was some discussion at the city council definitely in the last 3 years, about joining an energy consortium to be like our own energy service provider. And I didn't know how this program would feed into that sentiment. I know that we ultimately did not sign on to that power purchase agreement, or however you want to frame it. But it would, to me, seem like a great thing to create incentives either through expedited review or local incentives to reinstate the solar program here.
Yeah, working with the building official recently, I know he is working on a solar application process, and there's a digital template for that he's been working on implementing, and I believe that we're trying to associate that with our new LMS program, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, there is some effort to try to make that go a little quicker.
Okay, great, thank you. Director Lee, did you want to say something?
I was going to add something along the same lines as Mr. Drapkin's information. Essentially, although there's no funding to waive permit fees, for example, that had been something that was offered by the state in the past. Certainly, we're always looking for grant opportunities to re-up a program like that. But in the meantime, we are doing expedited plan checks and really trying our best to get very close to over-the-counter solar permits. That's our goal ultimately, but it is something that's very closely tied to our land management system and something that our building official is very passionate about and has been working on for quite some time.
Great, thank you, Director Lee. Yeah, it would seem to me that it's not just strictly sustainability in terms of energy generation, but it's very much a part of the planning landscape as well. Not just for expedited review, but for all of these new ideas for new developments, to have that included and have that be kind of enshrined in the way that we develop would seem like we'd be a lot more, by definition, sustainable moving forward. I missed a couple, so let's go ahead and go back to page 3 of the agenda report. And Ms. Paivon, I know that you mentioned environmental justice just briefly in your presentation, and I appreciate that. The part that I'm looking at is the latter half of the third paragraph on page 3. The future updates will also address other topics that are prompted by various state statutes, including incorporating environmental justice policies and incorporating reference to the recently adopted local hazard mitigation plan. EJ, or environmental justice, is still somewhat, to me, it's somewhat nebulous. So I'm not sure how the city is approaching environmental justice, because it's very much about social justice, racial justice as well. So I don't know if we have a working definition or how we're approaching it moving forward.
We don't have a working definition. This is something that is a state mandate that is among many state mandates that we're looking to incorporate into our general plan through an update. So we'll be fleshing those definitions out and approaches and strategies that are specific to Costa Mesa in the coming work efforts.
Okay, great, Director Lee, thank you. And I will mention, yes, Director Dropkin.
We do have some disadvantaged communities that will be looking towards fulfilling those requirements, though,
Yeah.
that we're aware of and that we're actually presented in the housing element.
Yeah, and I guess for us here on the dais, it's a question of, are we going to, at times, scale environmental justice as a citywide effort so that it's kind of ubiquitous across the landscape, or are we going to very specifically target communities that work within a specific definition? So if we don't have that definition, that's totally fine, but it would inevitably come to us at some point if we are planning to incorporate EJ into our decision-making as well.
It would, and we are planning to incorporate it into our decision-making, one, because it's a state mandate, but also because from the standpoint of meeting our general plan goals and policies, it's just the direction that we're moving towards. I think to answer your question from before, I think it's both. It is taking a citywide look at environmental justice, but it's also focusing on specific areas of the community that are recognized as disadvantaged communities within Costa Mesa and making specific policies for those areas.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I know that the EPA has a program called EJ Screen, which you can screen for certain communities. I believe it's at the block level, might be at the census tract level, I'm not sure. But it's a good tool to start targeting these kind of communities here in Costa Mesa.
Yeah, it's the census block level, and the slide in front of you does show which census block are considered disadvantaged communities based on their EnviroScreen.
Yeah, and it's a fun tool. You get to play with maps. You get to be a cartographer. So, great, thank you. If we move on to, let's see. Okay, if we look at page 7 of the staff agenda and compare that to page 204, recommendation C 9.1. I'm looking at the draft pedestrian master plan that says here on page 7, it was completed in June of 2022 and has several circulation element goals that are achieved through that. If we turn to page 204, recommendation C-9.1, it says incorporate the Costa Mesa bicycle and pedestrian master plan into the city's general plan. Is our recommendation tonight moving this along to city council, basically giving the go-ahead to the pedestrian master plan that we have yet to read or have a presentation on yet? I know we've been talking about it for quite a while now.
Yeah, I think Mr. Betancio could probably respond to that better than Development Services staff.
Okay, sure. Yeah, Mr. Betancio, if you wouldn't mind.
Again, thank you. Good evening, Chairman.
Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, of course. It's my understanding that at this point, we're still waiting on responses from tribal consultation to move forward with that.
Okay. All right, that's fine. So just to kick it back to the planning staff, by us moving this along to city council, this is not approving the pedestrian master plan, correct?
No, it's
It's just
definitely-
listing what is intended as far as what we send along.
Right, this is, the annual report is specifically just that. It's
Okay.
just a report on what we've done, what we're doing, and what are the projects in motion.
Okay. There's somewhere between 1 and 6 people up here that are chomping on the bit to get to that. So,
Yeah, I understand that, and staff definitely understands that as well. The PMP is in good draft form right now.
Okay.
We've had to wait a little bit on it from the perspective of some other general plan updates that we've had to consider based on state requirements.
Sure.
We're getting through those, and we're going to be right on them.
yeah. I know
And then now-
y'all have been busy, so.
And actually, in this situation, I can actually account for that we've actually started the process because we've done a tribal consultation, and that's already begun.
Okay, great, thank you. And I will, I think, happily end it on this last one before opening it up to my colleagues. And thank you so much for your patience and time, by the way. I really do appreciate the time to talk about all this, because I do think it's very important. I'll go ahead and end my questions on page 10 of the staff report. At the bottom, Fairview Developmental Center reuse. I think the quick question is, okay, we have an RFP that's going out summer of 2023. From your presentation, Ms. Paivon, it was this month, June. Has that gone out yet, now that we're approaching the tail end of the month?
Yes, so the RFP was released June 13, and we anticipate taking that process to City Council either August or September of this year.
Okay. And it says here in the 3.5 million in state funds that we are going to be doing community outreach and land use planning efforts for reuse of that center. So when are those meetings going to take place? Because that's going to be tremendously interesting for basically everyone in Costa Mesa to participate in.
Yeah, so we will have a set project timeline once we get a consulting firm on board to make sure that we meet all the state requirements for any regulatory, like CEQA statute, community outreach, public hearing, noticing. So we want to make sure we achieve those as well and incorporate it into our timeline. So it does affect when we achieve each goal for that project.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And I will go ahead and end on just a statement in saying that if my colleagues are curious to just kind of cut down on a tome of a presentation here, I found it very helpful to focus on pages 181 to 236. That basically encompasses the majority of the policies that we tend to see up here. And I just, for my own sake, I started highlighting certain sections that relate to certain types of agenda items that we hear on a regular basis. So I'd recommend that, 181 through 236. And with that, I can't believe it, my questions are done. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Commissioner Zick.
Thank you. A lot of my questions are going to sound very similar. And if you didn't know better, you might think that the chair and I collaborated on our points of interest, but we did not. Let me first say, though, that as long as I've been on the Planning Commission, there has never been an occasion when this item has gone through the consent calendar for approval without a separate discussion. I wouldn't characterize this as routine, and unless you're required to put it on the consent calendar, I would simply recommend putting it as an agenda item in the future. Okay, questions, and I'll try to be narrowly focused with my questions. The first one, relative to this annual report, are all 7 elements of the general plan required? Could our general plan have fewer than 7 elements, or are we required to have 7 elements?
You're required to address 7 elements or topics that are outlined by state statute. These topics could be incorporated into one element or separate elements. And then we, as a city, have other elements that addresses other important topics that the city feel necessary.
So we're required to address certain topics, and how we organize those in elements is up to us?
That's correct.
Okay. And then within the elements, as you've constructed them, are these separate objectives like LU1, LU 1.1, are those items that we have created, or are those dictated to us?
Some are pursuant to state statute, and some are as a result of community input.
Okay. All right. On page 6, LU 1.3, this is the item dealing with the strong encouragement of the development of owner-occupied housing. My question about that item is what specifically are you doing to achieve that? And I ask that in the context of a developer who comes forward with a plan to build a 7-story, for-rent apartment complex. They meet all the criteria, they go through the process, leads to an approval. Does absolutely nothing for owner-occupied. What specifically are we doing to strongly encourage owner-occupied housing, beyond just hoping?
Yeah, obviously our code is written with certain provisions in mind that encourage ownership housing. Our small lot subdivision ordinance encourages that with regards to allowing development incentives to create smaller properties for sale. Those are all for ownership.
We have an incentive program that
the ordinance in itself has less required standards
the
than
small lot ordinance.
Small lot ordinance, correct. Yeah.
Separate from that, do we have any other specific actions that we take that would be evidence of our strong encouragement?
I would add to that we also, the city in the past has adopted its urban plans in various areas of the city, which essentially similar to the small lot ordinance have development incentives to encourage ownership housing types. So much of this encouragement is built into our general plan and zoning code policies. It's intended to be a citywide look, not necessarily a project-specific look.
Got it. What would be an example of an incentive that a developer would see for developing an owner-occupied?
So usually it comes in the form of flexibility in development standards. So for example, it would be allowable to build an additional number of units capped at a certain number if the product was ownership housing versus rental.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Okay, page 8, and this is LU 2.6, which we've already covered. Encourage increased private market investment in declining or deteriorating neighborhoods. This was a topic that came up somewhat indirectly during the inclusionary housing ordinance study session, joint study session. And there was a comment by one official who was strongly opposed to the inclusion of an in lieu option that would allow for a developer to improve an existing housing development. And this says that we encourage the increased private market investment declining. So what I'm wondering is, when you heard that official state that concern, that they would rather have, in the context of the inclusionary housing ordinance, dilapidated housing rather than improved and upgraded housing, did that comment strike you and resonate with what this is as a policy goal of the city?
The comment didn't strike me that way. Commissioner Zick, I think what I saw when I heard that comment was really a concern for displacement and gentrification to the point that it caused displacement. Okay. I think when we're looking at policies like this, what we're trying to do is provide systemically development incentives to incentivize a property owner to reinvest in their property. But at the same time, there's also goals, policies, and objectives on the other side of things that balance concerns like displacement. So that's an ongoing discussion at this city and probably every city that's looking at redevelopment opportunities.
Okay, that's fair. And further down on number 8, this item LU 2.8 that talks about the limit of 4 stories for development south of the 405. In light of the reallocation and what is upcoming for rezoning, is this height limit of 4 stories going to remain?
As part, go ahead. Okay, so as part of that process, we will be reviewing all the general plan policies that may limit our achievement of providing for, or accommodating for our RENA allocation pursuant to our 6th cycle housing element. So we will be reviewing all policies, including this one.
And by you saying that, it means that we have no intention of strictly holding to this limit. That's a more pointed way of saying what you just said.
I don't think that's the case.
Okay.
Our intention is to review our development standards, and that's something that the council has actually asked us to do outside of just planning for future housing, just reviewing our development standards to ensure they make sense for community expectations. These days, much of our documents were established many years ago. A lot of things have changed. So our intention is to review the development standards, but certainly we have housing focus areas north of the 405 as well as south of the 405, and development standards for those two areas may look very different ultimately. We're just not there yet, and certainly that's something that we want to have community conversations about.
Okay, that's fair, I suppose. Page 9, LU 3.2. Actively enforce existing regulations regarding derelict or abandoned vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. And I read actively enforce as opposed to passively enforce, responding only to residents' complaints and concerns. This one catches my attention because just in a fairly small area that I routinely walk, I see lots, I shouldn't say lots, I see half a dozen violations that I've seen for the last 3-4 years. Boats in front yards, trailers parked, covered, not moved, covered with tarps, not moved, landscape, weed-filled yards, no change. So my question about this is, what are we doing? What is the evidence that we are actively enforcing these existing regulations? And short of me taking photos and submitting these as resident concerns, help me understand what we're doing to actively enforce these regulations.
Well, I think primarily there's the last part of that section that talks about that constitute a health, safety, and fire hazard. So there might be different levels of these issues where we more proactively enforce them versus ones where they've just not mowed their lawn adequately or regularly. So,
so like a boat in the front yard wouldn't be considered health and safety, so we wouldn't be concerned about that.
Health, safety, or a fire hazard that might, whereas we would react to that under a complaint situation, but not proactively.
Interesting, okay. Page 17, LU 10.1, engage with property owners, developers, and business owners to encourage the revitalization of hotels and motels. I've not talked to the Tourism Bureau. My guess is maybe the level of tourism is down in the city, and maybe we're not too concerned about that. This would indicate that it's a priority for us to revitalize hotels and motels, but I don't think it comes as a surprise to anyone here that we're in the process of converting hotels and motels to, what do they call it, supportive housing. So could you square what we're doing with what this says is what we want to be doing?
Certainly, with regards to the key program, motel key program, it generally involves hotels or motels or facilities that are in dire need of reinvestment. So it allows for the city to take advantage of a more affordable land cost and structural cost, whereas the other hotels, we certainly are doing the opposite, that are bringing in tourism. For example, there's projects in the North Costa Mesa specific plan where hotels have been allowed to increase their heights, to improve, to facilitate other type of developments such as restaurants or other type of activities that promotes tourism and allows for a higher caliber of stay.
But areas south of the 405, areas we might call maybe nice parts of Costa Mesa, wouldn't we also want to have hotels and motels upgraded and revitalized there too?
Certainly.
Very good. Page 19 then. I'm a little puzzled by something here. We have a significant RENA allocation that we have saluted to, adopted, moving forward with, which if and when implemented, could easily add 20 to 30,000 residents to the city. And I've asked about our infrastructure investment plans relative to what amounts to a 20 to 30% increase in the population of the city, specifically as it relates to roads. And then I see things here that talk about that as a goal, we want to pursue downgrading our arterials, implementing road diets. That's one of those euphemistic terms that I don't care for. And then encourage conversion of excess on-street parking. I know some parts of the city actually have excess on-street parking, so maybe this one's appropriate. Is this really our plan, is to downgrade arterials and implement road diets? That's really our plan, our goal?
Yeah, I think when it can be shown that there's excess capabilities for a roadway where we can implement multimodal transportation facilities, we're inclined to do so. That's really the intent of these policies. I definitely understand, Commissioner Zick, your concern with regards to the increases in density from the perspective of the RENA allocation and requirements. But you just have to strike a balance, and staff intends to do that.
All right, page 58, OSR 1.18 says that we have a goal to provide a minimum of 4.26 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents. What is our current acreage of parkland per 1,000 residents?
I offhand don't know that question. I'd have to get back to you on that one, Commissioner Zick.
Okay, assuming that we are not meeting that minimum, what specifically are we doing to get to that minimum? Again, low side compliant, low bar minimum. What are we doing to get there specifically?
I can start out with a few things, and then staff, if you'd like to add on, please do. One of the things that's a requirement of the code is essentially park in lieu fees or providing for park space anytime there's an associated residential development. And the intent there is to ensure that we're providing adequate parkland whenever we add housing units to the city. The other effort that the city is undertaking is outside of those private proposals for development projects. There is a city effort underway to always search for properties in Costa Mesa or opportunities such as joint use agreements with our school districts to increase our parkland, open space opportunities, recreational opportunities in general. So those are two ways that we intend to meet this goal. I think once we get the number that you're searching for, I don't think it'll surprise you that Costa Mesa probably does not meet that goal now. It's a community goal to increase our parkland, and it's something that every city struggles with that is a developed community.
Given that we're intending to grow the city by 20 to 30%, I think an objective like this takes on a little more urgency. My last question has to do with page 61. So I recognize from what I've heard that there are some very important archaeological and paleontological resources at Fairview Park, buried under piles of dirt, to protect them. And so long as they're buried under piles of dirt, they will remain protected and invisible and, for all intents and purposes, non-existent. You could say they're down there, but they don't do anyone any good. My question, because we have this as a goal, is what specifically are we doing to create an opportunity to reveal these resources in a way that they can be studied and appreciated and protected for the benefit of the residents and the scientific community, to the extent that that's a benefit to them as well?
I'll start off here, and then if anyone else has any comments they'd like to add, please. I think anytime you're talking about cultural resources, there are definitely different schools of thought as to how to treat cultural resources, but one of the ideas is that buried resources have innate value, and they may or may not be intended to be unearthed and studied or further just utilized by the community in an active way. So ultimately, the fate of Fairview Park and its uses are being studied now as part of the Fairview Park Master Plan. There's also an open space master plan that's also underway. All of those efforts seek to come to some kind of conclusion about what is the right balance for cultural resources of all sorts. So I think that's the intent there. I'm not sure that there's a plan to unearth and scientifically study further those buried resources at Fairview Park.
So I think I appreciate that answer. Kind of reminds me of the, if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? There's an innate value to these, and if they're buried forever, I guess my only question is, what possibly is that value? You don't have to answer the question, because I think I accept the answer that you've given. That's it for my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Zick. Anyone else? Okay, Commissioner Andrade.
Well, first off, thank you so much, staff, for putting this together. It was really a fun, informative, and very detailed review to really demonstrate the hard work that the city is doing in addressing a myriad of opportunities to better serve Costa Mesa residents. But first off, I definitely would love to recognize and support all the great work and detail along the lines of increasing housing accessibility, the housing programs that are going to be made available for our community. Project Home Key is definitely a national best practice in addressing homelessness in our community. So I was really excited to hear the news that just came out recently for Tribal Lodge. And yeah, as actually an individual who actually stayed in the Motel 6 that's being renovated now, I think part of the reason why those locations are, and I can't speak directly, but from my firsthand experience, is that the majority of the people that are staying in these motels are full-time residents of the motel because it's the most affordable thing that they can afford within their means. So this is such a huge win, I think, for our community, because not only are we ending homelessness by providing them a roof over their heads and their most likely families and pets and loved ones, but it's also the wraparound services, because studies demonstrate that it's not only the roof over the heads, but the wraparound services that they need, whether that's mental health, workforce development, upskilling, or further education. So I completely understand and again applaud the great investment the city is doing on that. So awesome on that. Also the improvements and developments on ADUs, making them affordable for low-income families, improvements on mobile homes. I appreciate, the being conscious of not what was that, kind of kicking people out in the effort to renovate certain areas. So that's great, and look forward to how this further develops. Really quickly on page 10 of the staff report, I think one of the things that struck out to me along the lines are one of the efforts of to address regional housing needs is kind of identifying rezoning candidate sites, and it's something that's in the works, which is another great option that it looks like is taking place this summer. You know, I'm sure that you guys have your pulse on everything, but I frequently travel down Red Hill, and post-pandemic, it seems like a lot of those businesses are no longer in use, right? I see a lot of for rent and available for purchase signs. So I don't know if that's an opportunity. You know, businesses that are no longer using their office spaces, somehow rezoning them, renovating them to making them affordable housing. Just a thought as I travel along the city. Along the lines of conservation, I think this is highlighted on the table on page 11, but then again on 41, all the great efforts that we're doing along conservation for Fairview Park. Applaud the efforts of hiring or sending out a contract for endemic environmental services to really help restore the uniqueness that is Fairview Park, so really appreciate that. Along those lines as well, on the improved air quality section, so this is page 44. I was here, it was really cool to hear that any resident can request to have a tree installed for a, you know, to provide greater shade in their community. Is this only limited to homeowners? Yes, is that a yes?
I was looking at Mr. Yang for a response.
I'm sorry. Commissioner Andrade, could you repeat your question again?
Yeah, so there's, you know, encouraging to improve air quality. And I see that one of the resolutions that one of the responses that we give for objective con 4.A is city's urban forest management. The city has implemented Costa Mesa Parkway tree planting program that is free to residents. So it's, you know, when you read further down, it says it's homeowners are responsible for providing water, da, 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 da. So I was asking is this only limited, when you refer to residents, is it only to homeowners? Or can just any community member that, you know, I don't know, frequents the street request support like that?
Right, so that program is open to the residents, also the commercial and industrial parties as well. For example, our maintenance services have programs in which where we get requests for planting of trees, and also the removal of trees too, which goes through our PAX commission as well. So all those efforts are made in conjunction with that, and we have programs in order to work with our residents and also our commercial partners as well in getting this meted out for them.
Okay, so commercial and private homeowners.
Correct.
Is what it's limited to. So it's not something that I can go on the 411 app and say, hey,
No.
this is a great place for a shady tree to improve walkability.
Correct.
Okay, so limited to private. On back to page 11 of the table, and I think Chairman Arith mentioned this on the support to, you know, provide adequate community services and the joint user agreements that we have with the Newport Mesa Unified School District. Again, as a parent in the community on the west side, I don't need to highlight on the lack of green space in our neighborhoods. I mean, but having access to these parks and playgrounds would be a slam dunk. I feel like that's an easy one that we can just check it off as complete. I know firsthand that the Newport Mesa School District is eager and happy to make these available. So maybe it's just I don't know, it seems like a matter of just logistics, getting on the same page. My own kid is participating in the summer program, so I know that it's only a very limited number of schools that have summer school across the district. So again, just a great opportunity to just knock this one out the park, slam dunk, and really support our low-income communities. I know we're hearing the loud neighbors on that just got a fence put up, but the West Side has kind of been dealing with this for quite some time, and so school parks have been inaccessible to them for many, many years. So again, great opportunity to just better support all, including West Side residents. Again, and then finally, just wanted to applaud the general focus on walkability and bikeability, along schools and that have limited parking. It's such a big one, which again would support our efforts on addressing environmental issues, improving air quality, and health, just general health across our schools. Just as a parent, feeling good, trusting that my kid can bike her way to school is a big ticket ask, knowing how these streets run. So again, applaud those efforts and making that more accessible to our community. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Andrade. You actually said something that'll probably end up being one of my new favorite expressions: knock it out of the park and slam dunk. I love it.
I'm not good with sports, but I know those two references and
All right.
are translatable. So.
Thanks. Commissioner Vivar.
Yeah, I won't take too much more time because I think we've done a very robust review of the general plan, a lot more than I thought we would have up here. But I'm glad that we're doing that. I think that's what we're getting paid to do up here. So I'm glad that we're doing that. And also, I'm sure we'll have members of the public as well who might want to comment. So I'm looking forward to that as well. So I've got a couple questions here. So first of all, I believe this is the second time I hear that ADUs are being counted towards our affordable housing unit count. So I'm just wondering, is that permitted by HCD or not? Because and the reason I ask is just because somebody creates an ADU doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be affordable, and for whom would be the question, because somebody could add an ADU to a $2 million home in Costa Mesa and charge rent comparable to maybe a higher tiered apartment in Costa Mesa. So I'm just wondering how we square that with the language we keep using surrounding ADUs as affordable housing.
Yeah, so accessory dwelling units have always been able to be counted as an increase in units related to the city's production of housing. I think more in the past, we just haven't had that type of production until more recently when state law and those implementation to development standards have come into effect. Related to the affordability aspect of that, the city is making a determination based on assumptions based on a number of factors. So Orange County has an affordability analysis for just rent in general. So using that as a baseline and then taking into factors to project specific, including the number of bedrooms, the sizes of the ADU, and general location, we are able to make a determination and an assumption of kind of what affordability that unit might fall into as it relates to the state's categories of affordability. And even to add on to that going forward, I would add on that the implementation of the land management system will allow us to get more accurate data. So one option we do have that we're kind of lacking, at least at this point, is we are able to get, if we are able to get kind of project-specific data from the owner, if they say we're going to rent this out to a relative, or we're not even going to charge rent to a relative, we can even more so make a determination that that would be an affordable unit since we have something from an owner. But at this point, we're just making assumptions based on factors that we know and some guidance from the county.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that the affordability isn't necessarily guaranteed, but we hope it is. kind of thing?
Yeah, and I think what you're kind of referring to is deed restricted versus non-deed restricted. So in kind of the density bonus projects, there are kind of terms to ensure that those units are affordable. In these cases, these are non-deed restricted units, and based on the city's assumptions of kind of by nature of the size, location, and those factors, that's how we are making that determination.
Right, and I guess the reason I wonder this is that I think that a homeowner, especially of a more expensive property, say $2.5 million dollar property in Costa Mesa, I don't think people just build ADUs sort of out of their kindness of their hearts to house grandma or a relative. I think that the idea behind that is obviously to collect some rent and obviously collecting as much rent as they could. And I, as somebody who works for the LA Department of Transportation processing permits for the city, I've worked in both the central and western divisions of the permit review counter, and I can tell you that the west side of LA, which is we all know is closer to Santa Monica and is the more shall we say affluent part of the city, is having an absolute explosion in ADU requests, whereas the central office isn't really seeing much. So I guess I just put that out there as a concern of mine. So whether or not we count them or not, just to kind of keep in the back of our minds. The second thing I want to mention, or I want to ask about, is the pedestrian master plan. So I in going over the handout or packet we were given, I believe it was earlier this year, or might have even been last year. I can't remember anymore. The handouts included kind of crossouts of sections of the circulation plan and other parts of the general plan that would be modified as part of approval of the pedestrian master plan. So I'm just wondering, is what we are looking at here today as part of our handouts, did that include the markups that the pedestrian master plan is supposed to do in the general plan, or no?
No, it does not include any proposed revision to the circulation element to incorporate the pedestrian master plan. That will come to you in the future for discussion.
Okay. So, Mr. Brettatencio, at any point, do you foresee there being changes, substantive or not, between what we looked at in the handout that was given to us for the proposed changes to the general plan per the updated pedestrian master plan after tribal consultation or any of the other hoops that the PMP needs to go through before it gets to us?
Yeah, and good evening, Commissioner Vivar. As regarding that, I mean, ultimately that decision is higher decision than myself, but I will speak to the fact that the consultant contract for the PMP was expanded to include presentation to this particular body, but not for any substantive changes to that document, and any future changes to that document would need to be hashed out as far as that goes. But again, that would be a question for Raja and Jennifer.
Okay. And as for, because I think one of the bigger sort of underlying goals of our discussion up here tonight of the general plan is to make Costa Mesa more livable. So as part of that, would at any point either ourselves or the city council discuss maybe further additions to the PMP proposal that would have our city work towards those goals more specifically. For example, something in the general plan that would encourage, for example, the addition of street furniture or any project that would modify the street frontage to make sure that those are closest to the street level, and for example, some kind of propose or at least objective in the circulation plan that would, for example, encourage the addition of new project driveways into completely new builds in Costa Mesa, whether that be residential or commercial, to a lower volume street or an alley when possible, as opposed to having access from large arterials like Harbor Boulevard or Adams.
I think that those items could certainly be discussed, but I think they're beyond the purview of the item present before the body today.
Right, yeah, okay, of course. All right, thank you, Mr. Bertatencio. My next question, I
Thank you,
think,
Commissioner.
will probably be best tackled by either Ms. Lee or Mr. Drapkin. So this is probably the third or fourth time I hear about this statistic in that Costa Mesa is 60% renter and roughly, and 40%, I guess, owner in terms of a residential stock in the city. So, and we talk a lot about moving in a direction where there is more, there are more ownership opportunities, whether that be in the form of single-family homes or condominiums or townhomes or whatever it may be. And so I wonder, what would be the ratio that we would like to build towards as in terms of goal, rather than just kind of a nebulous, let's decrease our residential or increase our portion of ownership opportunities. So would we be looking to something like 55, 45, 50, 50, 40, 60 the other way?
Yeah, that's a tough question, and really that's what the general plan is there for. It's for an outreach situation and a council to review with public comments about what the future of the city should be and should look like. From your question is specific. What is the desire of the community for rental versus ownership? Right now, it's higher percentage of rental, like you mentioned. It's based on our existing housing stock. And right now, there's a market demand, actually, for more rental housing than ownership. We're seeing that with the development proposals and the interest that's coming in. So having that policy there is tough. It's a bit, it's something that we have to consider. It's probably liable, it's probably possibly going to change based on the demands of the market right now. I think folks are more interested in renting than owning. So maybe this policy is a little antiquated, but it still is a policy and we still have to deal with it. But from the perspective of knowing that sweet spot that you speak of, Commissioner Vivar, it's a tough call and it's a community-based call.
So what I'm hearing is, realistically, we see our ratio of rental to ownership skewing further up, correct, where the 60% increases?
It's hard to estimate what our future holds with regards to some of these density increases and rezoning efforts and community outreach, where we go with them. Ultimately, the market is going to be the market. So.
Right. So out of the permits for the construction of your dwelling units in the last year, do you happen to know what ratio of that would have been rental dwelling units to ownership dwelling units?
All ADUs would be considered rental units in this for reporting. Yeah.
Oh, but I mean, did we have any other permits for example, condominium units or apartment units that obviously are not ADUs?
We did not have any 0 to the, or the 5 and over categories, 5 units or over in the last cycle, and very few in the cycle before that was approved. We had some developed based on previous years going really far back into entitlements that were developed and permitted or finalized. But from the perspective of housing development that's occurred over the last several years, not has occurred, but have been entitled, it's mostly been single-family residential. ADU is dwarfed everything else this year. So, and then also responding to some of your previous concerns with ADU development, I think that's a valid concern with regards to the value and the rental rate on those. I've seen that in other jurisdictions, some of the higher priced jurisdictions like the coastal cities and stuff, they do see the taking advantage of the state ADU requirements. But I will say here in Costa Mesa, predominantly what we're seeing with regards to these ADU productions is the productions of housing at a rate that is more affordable without a doubt than what would be normally consistent with rental and without a doubt a housing purchase.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Drapkin. I guess just to that, before I launch into the next part of my comments here, which won't be very long, I promise. But and I made this comment as well at during the joint study session, and there were a couple other officials as well who had that similar concern on the having our city or encouraging developers to build ownership opportunities as well, even if that's in the form of condominiums or townhomes, because we all know that any single-family home in Costa Mesa will be incredibly unaffordable, and so perhaps maybe encouraging sort of more higher density ownership, residential ownership opportunities. I don't know how we would do that. That's up to the policymakers, but just having some kind of an incentive as well for that, so that people who grew up in the city like myself and who would like to own property in the city may do so, because otherwise I think the more likely scenario is that once a lot of young people like myself go out into the world after high school and become college educated and come back to the city, and even those who don't, even those who may pursue a kind of vocational school tract or some other kind of form of work, I think many of us young people like myself may end up leaving the city to find ownership opportunities elsewhere, and I think we've been hearing about that happening as well. So it would be a shame to keep losing more of our younger folk, especially as we try to balance the future of the city and the balance between the older population and younger population for the sort of sustainable growth and of our city. I want to tackle two policies of Section 6 of the land use element, and the first one being land use element 6.1, which we've probably heard a lot about over the course of our meetings, which is the to encourage and promote a mix of goods and services in the city that serve local, regional, and international spending. And so I'm just wondering, what is the city doing to encourage and promote a mix of goods and services in those three categories: the local level, the regional level, and the international level?
Yeah, referring to land use 6.1, the policy language is encourage a mix of land uses that maintain and improve the city's long-term fiscal health.
Oh, whoops, I think I'm crossing my wires here. It's probably, Is it 6.3, Mr. Drapkin, or I know what I'm referring to.
Let me see if
I'm
I can
tired.
scroll down and find one. And yeah, it amazes me on your memory most of the time. So let me see if I can help. I think you were super close. So land use 6.2.
There we go.
You were one off.
All right.
And your memory is much better than mine. So I'll just help a little. Continue to promote and support the vitality of commercial uses to meet the needs of local residents and that support regional serving commercial centers. The city does a lot of efforts in regard to this land use policy. In things that I've spoken in the past at this during this discussion with regards to our economic development efforts. We have an economic development plan that we're formulating currently. Our code encourages land use approvals where they meet certain land use allowances, more than most cities that I've seen. That's a standout in my mind in some of the changes to certain land uses and what's allowed. There's a lot of flexibility with regards to a lot of land use approvals in Costa Mesa that aren't available in other cities in the surrounding area. So from that perspective, I would say key in my mind is the zoning ordinance and the way it's written, some of the parking standards, a lot of things, especially with regards to commercial activity, really incentivizes the reuse of areas and the use of areas with new commercial activities, both regional serving and local serving.
Right. And so as for the policy that I incorrectly referenced, I guess, what are we doing as a city to improve our fiscal health, which I would think myself would be promoting some kind of a mix of industries and business types in cities, so that if some kind of a market phenomenon or something may affect a certain type of industry, that we don't become heavily reliant on a certain one or a few types of industries to keep our city going in terms of tax revenue and vitality of commercial centers.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at this land use 6.1, which says encourage a mix of land uses that maintain and improve the city's long-term fiscal health, that's what one you're referring to. I think that is, with regards to that one, what it's specifically written, the purpose of it is when the city goes through a process of updating its zoning ordinance to allow certain uses, and either by right or by permit, and just really looking at those uses from the perspective of, will it generate the city's fiscal health? And from what I've reviewed in the zoning ordinance, it does do that.
Okay. And then as for the land use element 6.7, which refers to encourage new and retain existing businesses. So I guess what I'm most curious about here is retain existing businesses. So how is the city working to retain existing businesses amid the sort of market turmoils we've seen in the last few years, and sort of market forces?
Certainly, and there are probably many examples. Some of the examples that have occurred in the last years during the pandemic were allowing significant flexibilities for churches, but that's not really commercial, but flexibilities for restaurants, flexibilities to sit outside, and then going beyond that, looking for more flexibilities to sit outside, and the council directing staff to look into more ideas of promoting fiscal health and other types of incentives for commercial development and to keep our existing uses. There's the same occurred with retail as well, so for certain things.
So that's great. I guess as for balancing different types of businesses and industry, I guess how do we maybe balance in the encouraging of new business ventures in the city and entrepreneurial opportunities with hoping to preserve the local businesses that are already here.
You know, that's an interesting question, and it's really something that I'll circle around towards, but from speaking with our economic development administrator and going and just quizzing him about, you know, what our current status is of occupancy is, and really we have a very low vacancy rate in the city for our commercial businesses. So whatever we're doing, I would say we're doing it right with regards to that. And a lot of other cities don't have that situation. They've got stores that are closed and blocks of them, but not here in Costa Mesa. I have a feeling that it's mostly derivative of our area as being so centralized and people driving in from Huntington or Newport or Irvine or Santa Ana or Fountain Valley. We're just surrounded by everyone. So I think everybody knows Costa Mesa and uses it. We're super lucky for that. So I circled around so far wide I forgot your question. So you're gonna have to help me out again. And I know your memory can do it, so I'm gonna ask.
It was how we balance encouraging new entrepreneurial. So okay, I'll simplify this. How we balance the creation of new businesses in the city with the ones that are already here. Because you did mention that, you know, because our vacancy rate is so low, you could just almost easily draw the logical conclusion that if our vacancy is so low and we are bringing in new business types, then something's got to give, aka existing businesses being displaced.
Yeah, I think you answered the question for me. I appreciate that. There is a lot of give and take when it comes to that, and as businesses go out, new businesses come in real quickly, and I don't have a good solid answer for how to retain existing businesses. We don't have a business assistance program that I know of, which would be good. But like you said, our current vacancy rate is pretty low, so it must mean that everybody's working out pretty well.
Right. Well, I will add some kind of credit to the city, and this is an older program that, you know, predates 2020, but in 2020, the small business grant program that the city provided was like $10,000 grants, I believe, to businesses of a sort of smaller nature, and I believe it was up to, or maybe it was just 10,000 for everyone. But basically, it was a great way to make sure that the small business that were feeling the crunch of the COVID lockdowns were able to stay afloat. And I would just love for our city to, I don't know, keep coming up with creative ways to make sure that the local mom and pop shops that, you know, make our city so diverse and kind of create these communities, sense of community and around the city afloat as well going forward.
Yeah, I'll make sure that when we write the program that we consider that. That's a really good suggestion.
Yeah, because we've done it before, and I said awesome program, and it 2020 is starting to feel like you know, in the rearview mirror, but you know, definitely that program was awesome, and it'd be great to see more things like that. And also, I don't know if we or the city council ever hashed out any kind of permanent al fresco policy as well, but I think in terms of, for example, the restaurant sector, I think that would be great to kind of encourage the city to keep doing, and you know, encourage restaurants to come to Costa Mesa and take advantage of that program if it does become permanent, if it already isn't. And that's it for me. Thank you so much, and I appreciate my colleagues up here for really delving into this, and Ms. Lee and Mr. Drafkin and everyone else up here. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Vivar. Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you guys for all the hard work that went into this report and is reflected in this report. I think we're doing a lot on a lot of fronts, and staff is doing a great job. I'm glad to be working with a community that recognizes our acute affordability problem right now and is working on solutions. The solution is not obvious, it's really tricky, and we're trying lots of different things, especially for the most vulnerable. And I think that's great, and I look forward to continued efforts. I want to confirm on, let's start with page 10 of the staff report. It says for the calendar year 2022, 38 housing units completed construction and received building permit final. So that was 28 single-family homes and 14 ADUs. And is that all the housing that was produced in the city last year?
That's just specifying received certificates of occupancy.
Right. That's the entirety of new units that got their final sign-off.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Two other commissioners mentioned this. Land use, I don't know if the recommendations or policies, I keep forgetting, but 5.2 regarding schools. I think that one really popped out at me. I'd never noticed that one before. And I hope that we have a chance to strengthen ones like that, especially in light of the pressure we have now to produce more housing. I've seen school sites which serve as, well, first of all, they should double as community open spaces. And to the extent that we're able to work with the school districts, that is an absolute priority, especially in park-poor neighborhoods. That's a huge deal. West side, east side, everywhere. And as pro-housing as I am, I think we need to build more housing. The worst thing that could happen is those things get carpeted over with new units. So I look forward to diving back into this general plan in the next few months and strengthening language like that, like land use 5.2. The land use goals and objectives, policies, recommendations, they're all over the place. There's good ones. There's ones that I think need to be modified. A lot has changed in the last 8 or 9 years. I focused mostly on the circulation element ones. I think the city is doing more than we took credit for in this report. I think, let's see. Circulation element. Okay, C19 talks about traffic calming. C113 talks about physical measures constructed to lower speeds, improve safety, and reduce the impacts of motor vehicles. 115, implement neighborhood approved traffic calming measures in residential neighborhoods. We have a lot to brag about in there, especially compared to our neighboring cities. We're really ahead of the pack when it comes to this sort of thing. C116, establish priority ranking system to evaluate traffic calming requests. 17, pursue programs that reduce vehicle speeds and cut through traffic on local streets. We reduced speed limits on 17 segments of the city. I think we're only one of a handful of cities in the entire state that took advantage of that new law. C26, periodically review and update traffic signal timing at all intersections to maintain traffic signal coordination and accommodate bicycle and pedestrian needs. Leading pedestrian intervals, right? Is that how it goes? I forgot about those. I remember when that went to council, but out walking around, I definitely notice it. Every time I cross Newport Boulevard at 18th, there's always at least 2 or 3 other people crossing, either on foot or bike, and that's one of the places. West 19th and Pomona also. It's definitely noticeable, definitely improves safety. C61 talks about collecting data and using that to inform new measures. We have the pedestrian master plan in the pipeline, as well as the local road safety plan. And then C83, develop, install, and maintain a bicycle and pedestrian wayfinding signage. We have that program underway too. So we have a lot of progress to be bragging about. I'm going to bring up a half a dozen of these, and I won't pause and wait for a response and put everybody on the spot. But to the extent that we have anything to say on these, Mr. Thomas, I think some of us might be curious. I'll run through them. Let's see. C11 on page 19, not of the staff report, but of the white pages. Update the city's engineering standards for public and private streets to provide for safe, comfortable, and attractive access and travel for pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and transit users for all ages, abilities, and modes of travel. That is a great line, and I'm glad that's in our general plan. I couldn't have said it better myself. The city action, description of city action in the next column, only mentions the MUTCD, the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which was really a guidebook on signage, right? On not really engineering standards. So the policy is to update the city's engineering standards, much more than markings and signage. So I'm just going to call out a few of these. 1.4, 1.5, and 1.8. Those are on page 19 as well, that Commissioner Zick brought up. Pursue downgrade of arterials that no longer have the demand requiring their build-out to plan capacity. Implement road diets on street segments with excess capacity to enhance bicycle and pedestrian facilities. And then 1.8 is specific to East 17th Street. And I think if we're serious about our other objectives, about being reducing auto dependency and all those negative impacts that come with that, if we really expect to be implementing these 11,000 units that we're planning for, this is why I'm focusing on circulation, because now is the time to make sure that our streets are set up so that new residents come with the understanding, developers, when they submit their applications, already have the understanding that this is a city. This is not some strung out, sprawling exurb where everybody drives for everything. We're a compact, relatively urban environment, and if we're going to have 150, 180,000 people, everybody driving for everything doesn't work. And so before all of our streets fill up with cars and traffic, we got to fix those streets now before we start receiving those applications for high density development. Couple more. 2.1, establish a citywide crosswalk policy to address installation, maintenance, removal, and enhancement of crosswalks at intersections and mid-block locations. I don't know if we have this, but I would love to see the protocol for keeping the paint bright and fresh, especially the yellow ones around schools. But I see a lot of crosswalks, whether they're striped or just 2 lines or bike lanes or even the green markings where it's faded. And it's such a low-hanging fruit to fix. 4.18, coordinate with OCTA to improve transit services in the city, including strategies such as bus rapid transit, express services. This is a big one that I really like. Community circulators. So again, going back to, we're going to have a population growth. We're going to have a growth spurt when it comes to population. Community circulators, all the beach cities do this. And we're not technically, we don't have a coastline, but I think that would be a good, OCTA is a big agency that maybe it's hard to wrestle with them. Local circulators is another way to do that. Last thing, and I'll stop. 9.3, require new developments to provide adequate bicycle parking and pedestrian access. That's another thing that's so easy. These residential or commercial developers, they're dealing with so much complexity. Fire sprinklers, elevators, all sorts of things. A bike rack is very easy, low-hanging fruit that really can make a difference for a lot of people. So I'll stop there. Those are the ones I wanted to bring up. Mostly, these are things that, in my opinion, are most urgent because we are going to open up the general plan and mess with land use policies and bring everything into alignment with the housing element. But these are things that in my opinion, they're already in the circulation element, they're already good, and we just need to be making progress on all of them before we start getting a lot of housing applications. So, Mr. Thomas, if you have anything to say to all that.
No, I think in the interest of time, I will agree with that. I think you hit the nails on the head of your comments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
And yeah, that's everything I wanted to bring up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Toller. Anyone else want to revisit anything? Nope. The whole thing, Commissioner Vivar said. All right. Well, commissioners, thank you very much for some extremely thoughtful questions and ideas. And to staff for giving some tremendous responses to our questions. This is exceedingly important to us, and I think a great opportunity for us to kind of dive in and better understand where the general plan is currently and where it's kind of going, because we need to track with that as well. So thank you so much for bearing with us. I think, what are we looking at? 2 hours and 20 minutes for a consent calendar item. Is that a new record? Yeah, Director Dropkin says yes. Okay.
Public comment still.
Pardon me?
Public comment still.
Public comments. Okay, sure. So let's go ahead and turn it over for public comments, starting with Ms. McDonald.
Good evening again, Commissioners. Yeah, I won't be as long as you were, but that was great. You know, I appreciate this item being pulled. It's really something that should not be on the consent calendar because it is very important. And these reports are, you know, one of the best ways to see how our city is doing in terms of fulfilling the goals in the general plan and increasing our housing supply. So, good questions about the general plan. I'm glad that you're focusing on that so that when that update comes along, you know, we can incorporate a lot of these good ideas. I'm not going to go into the weeds, but one of the biggest areas of concern, though, I have is that we're seeing this pattern building where we're missing deadlines with the HCD. And I have this screenshot here of the dashboard on the progress reports. Now, Costa Mesa is late again, and we are the only city in Orange County that did not submit its reports for the past 2 years. And while there may not be a penalty for that filing, missing the filing, doesn't make our city look good, and we've already got ourselves in the spotlight by having a non-compliant housing element, and we don't want to draw a target on our back with the HCD. My other concern is transparency. The city seems to have a hard time making this sort of information available, readily available to the public. I also noticed in the report this vague answer of ongoing on several questions. And that's not illuminating to the general public, particularly those who aren't coming down to Planning Commission and City Council meetings. So it would be better to know what the actual progress is the city's making towards the goal. And then, so the question came up about the recommendations in the circulation element. I was the chair of the then Bikeway and Walkability Committee at the time the ATP was adopted. It was really purely political. Staff felt that the City Council would not approve the ATP if those recommendations were policies. The City Council wasn't particularly friendly, more like hostile towards the cycling community. I mean, they were hostile towards staff and the residents, so no wonder they're no longer here. But you'll see those recommendations come up in the PMP, and I urge you to make that change.
Thank you, Ms. McDonald. Yes, sir.
Yeah, let me move that a little bit. So Now, Cynthia has dug into a deep dive into, for what limited time we've had for this report. It would be nice for the general public to have several weeks to dive into the report, then come with comments to a full agenda item rather than it be a consent item. But I really appreciate all the commissioners diving into it and the time you spent detailing, and all your questions were really great. So I appreciate your effort to study it. And so I want to echo the thing about the active transportation element, part of the circulation element, that it be changed to policies from recommendations. And it's true, it was a political decision to weaken that back in 2018 when it was adopted. So that's something we've been advocating for a while, and your support would be good on that. The RENA numbers. So the fifth cycle, we had like 1 or 2 units or something. There was a requirement, and now that's almost 12,000. So we're looking at probably the biggest general plan land use element update that the city's ever seen since maybe South Coast Plaza was designed and implemented. It's huge. And so you really got your work cut out for you, looking at all these things. Your question about height limits. The housing element is requiring rezoning for 40 and 50 units per acre all over the city. We're talking 5, 7, 8-story buildings. The height limit is gone. You know, for south of the freeway. So we're going to have to plan for high-density hubs, which will be an exciting process to think about. But, you know, where are the parks going to be? How are we going to provide for fire and police services? We're going to need new schools. You know, the enrollment is going to start to go up again. It's and the fact that we're losing local control for this kind of planning is boy, it's going to be very controversial. Things are going to get hot for a while. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Does anyone else in, excuse me, does anyone else in chambers wish to speak on this item? All right, seeing none. Anna, do we have anyone online or on phone?
No, we do not, Mr. Chairman.
All right, great. So I'll go ahead and close the public comment.
Someone just rose their.
Oh yeah, let's go for it.
Call-in user, you may provide your public comment.
Thank you. I have to agree with the prior 2 speakers about this should have been a separate agendized. It's a huge thing to be slid in a consent calendar type of listing. And one of the commissioners mentioned about our motels being full because they're more affordable. And I guess my question was, if they were full, now are they empty and they spend $10 million and then put 50 different people in these rooms with a net plus of 0? I'm curious of that. And someone asked about the sustainability amount, and I think that's very important. That should be somewhere for the public to know about. We talked about parks per 1,000 people, and 4.6 was the amount you gave. I believe Costa Mesa is under 3 acres per 1,000. And retaining existing businesses, absolutely we should do that. I mean, a primary case is when we built Triangle Square and took away a number of successful businesses for a project that was a failure from day one. But my primary concern of this whole thing is what's going to happen to the west side. Every council, you have Hispanic women that are concerned. And what this sounds like is just a giant process that's going to dislodge the very people that need it. You're going to put all of these huge complexes, and unless there is something serious for low income and very low income, they are going to be priced right out of the market even more than they are today. Someone mentioned about the ADUs being for the grandmas. Well, I'm helping my friend find a place, and last weekend in Costa Mesa, an ADU, $2,700 for 520 square feet. So, you know, I don't know what's going to happen with the housing, but it is a concern, and I hope that the commissioners for the West Side keep your eyes wide open, because the West Side is going to be a target in everything that's going on here. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Spadoni. Anna, do we have anyone else?
No, we do not, Mr. Chairman.
All right, well, to the three speakers, Ms. McDonald, Mr. Huffman, and Ms. Spadoni, thank you for chiming in. I appreciate it. With no one else to speak, I'll go ahead and close down the public comments portion of the meeting for this item, and thank Commissioner Zick for reminding me that we do have public comments on this. I appreciate that. Which brings me back to where I was before public comments, which is to thank staff for entertaining us for now the last better part of the last 2.5 hours. To me, this was much needed. As a group, we needed to dive into the general plan, to review these policies together, give feedback, and to get a sense of where things are going over time. This was a great thing. And I loved it so much, I think we should pull every consent calendar item from here on out, if you want. But joking aside, thank you all for chiming in, and to staff for bearing with us. We really do appreciate it. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments? Commissioner Zick.
I was going to wait till after there was a motion for comments, but I'll comment now, I guess. Without a doubt, this is a tremendous amount of work by staff and likely consultants too, but I put that under the umbrella of staff. I heard once one of our officials bemoan the fact, bemoan their view that the city lacked visioning. We didn't have a vision. And I couldn't help but scratch my head over that comment. The general plan is the vision. In fact, it's the plan to accomplish the vision. Now, you can say you don't like the vision, you don't agree with the vision, you think the vision is out of date because somehow we're more modern now than we were 10, 20 years ago. But this does reflect the vision. That doesn't make it right, but this is the vision. If you don't like this, let's work on changing the vision. But once we have this vision, this document refers continually throughout this thing to goals, objectives, and policies. Those aren't the same thing. Those words really are not interchangeable, which brings me to one of the problems that I have when I go through this document. First of all, I think there are too many items. If I was in charge of trying to accomplish this plan and report status on all these things, I think I'd need a pretty large staff of people. People would have to be assigned to these things or they don't get done. It's just lip service to have them here if you're not working on them. And I don't think we're about lip service. So I think there are too many things here. And maybe to the point of the recommendations on the circulation element, maybe some of those should be consolidated if they're similar. But there are too many things here. There's also conflicting things here. On the one hand, we talk about we want developers to improve property. We want owners to improve property. I think that's common sense. I'm actually shocked that we have people that think that's a bad thing, to upgrade property. But then we do have another policy in here that says, yeah, but we really don't want to displace people. Well, I don't know that you can have your cake and eat it too in that regard. So they're conflicting. So I think the policies and then the goal, those need to be deconflicted. Or you're just going to have people sit on one side or the other of those items. I think of goal as being something that is could be a point on the horizon. That's where you're going. It may be aspirational, may or may not be measurable. So if you have a goal and then you say ongoing, 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 and you say it over 25 times in this thing, ongoing. Okay, well, if it's aspirational, I guess I could give you a pass for saying it's ongoing. But if you were an employee of mine and this was a goal I expected you to achieve, and I said, how you doing on that goal? And you said, oh, I'm on it, boss, it's ongoing. Yeah, but are you getting anywhere? It's ongoing. If it was a goal that I expected you to achieve, that would be unacceptable. If it's aspirational, I think ongoing makes perfect sense. But then you talk about objectives, and objectives is a little smaller, a little narrower, a little finer, and what I would say is something that is or should be measurable. And I once heard that if you're not keeping score, you're just practicing. If you're not keeping score, you're just practicing. So when you got page after page after page of all these things that you're doing, unless you're scoring some of these things, I don't know, it all looks good. You can say you're getting there. But if these are really goals that we want to achieve, then we need to have some kind of measurement, something objective that lets us know we're actually getting there. I don't expect you to make any change in those regards with this item. I don't actually expect you're going to do anything to change in this regard between now and next year or the following year. I would sure hope you would consider it, though.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Zick. Anyone else? Commissioner Vivar.
Yeah, I echo the sentiments of my colleague Commissioner Zick on the goals and objectives. And I just want to round it off with the policies. Whereas the goals are, maybe something on the horizon and objectives are a bit more immediate, I would say policies are what we should be looking at now. It's the checklist we should have on hand when we write and discuss policies, new policy proposals in the city, when we review proposed projects, when we review programs a city is developing or implementing. And I think that in the sort of giantness that the general plan is, a lot of these finer elements, these things on the checklist get lost and or forgotten. And it is true, some of this can be a bit contradictory. Some ordinances that get written compared to the general plan policies, and maybe some decisions that are made or practice of the work of bodies of the city. And so I would just like to remind my colleagues and staff that these policies should be something that we hold close to our side as we review and projects and the work we do, just as a building inspector might go through a project, a new build, and check off safety concerns that they might see or other things that come up. And to the public, this checklist should be for you as well to read, to digest, and to hold us up here accountable, as well as city council and staff, as to how we're doing to measure up to these goals, objectives, but especially policies, and making sure that we're being consistent with the visioning that we've set forth in the general plan and with what we're doing as a city in practice. And so that's all I have to say. Thank you for the great presentation, staff, and for bearing with us, and for the members of the public as well that engage in this. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Vivar. Anyone else? All right, brings us to voting time. Would anyone like to make a motion on this item? Motion made by Toller. What's your motion?
I move that the Planning Commission receive and file. Is that what we're doing tonight?
You're actually recommending that the commission review and that the
Sorry, recommending that.
City Council approve it.
Okay. I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the 2021 and 22 annual progress report for the 2015 and 2015 to 2035 Costa Mesa General Plan.
All right, seconded by Commissioner Vivar. Would you like to say anything further, Vice Chair?
No.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Commissioner Vivar.
Nothing.
All right. Anything else? All right, let's bring it to a vote.
That motion carries 6-0.
All right, thank you so much. Well, we made it. 2 hours, 40 minutes. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break before we get to our ongoing work with cannabis. Thank you. We'll see you in 10 minutes. Oh, man. Yeah. Welcome back to the Planning Commission meeting of Monday, June 26, 2023. I call the meeting into order. And Anna, if you'd please read the title for public hearing item number 1, please.
Public hearing item number 1, planning application 22-07 for a conditional use permit to operate a retail cannabis storefront business with delivery located at 2013 Newport Boulevard, Strains. Please note we have received public comments on this item that have been provided to the commission and made a part of the record. This is a call for any ex parte communications.
All right, thank you, Anna. Commissioners, any ex parte, starting with Commissioner Rojas, Commissioner Zick, Commissioner Andrade, Vice Chair? Nope, and none for me, no ex parte. So I'll now turn it over to Mr. Yeager to present the item. Thank you.
Alrighty. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Yeager, Associate Planner here with the City of Costa Mesa. Before you tonight is the application for a retail cannabis dispensary at 2013 Newport Boulevard. This request, it would require a Type 10 state license to allow for a storefront retailer. And in addition, the applicant is proposing to offer retail delivery at this location. As Anna said, the business name is Strains. To date, the Planning Commission has approved 20 CUPs for retail cannabis storefronts. The approved CUPs are shown on the slide in front of you in green. The pending CUP tonight is the dot in blue. So far, the applicant has successfully completed the initial application steps, including the pre-application and cannabis business permit application before they submitted for the conditional use permit application. If the CUP is approved tonight, the applicant would continue on in the remaining steps, including obtaining building permits, final inspections, and the issuance of the CBP. The proposed storefront, it is located at 2013 Newport Boulevard in between 19th Street and West Bay. The subject property is zoned C2, which is the general business district commercial zone. The existing development on the property consists of an approximately 3,500 square foot, 2-story, single tenant commercial building. The storefront would occupy the entire building. The property is surrounded by other commercially zoned properties. The 55 freeway and Newport Boulevard are to the east. The project site is immediately adjacent to an existing mobile home park on the property behind, an office to the right of the property, and a motel to the left. The screen in front of you shows some existing conditions. These are some site photos of the property. The building was constructed in the mid-1970s. It is currently vacant. The most recent tenant was a chiropractic office, and they vacated the site approximately a year ago. The proposed site plan is on the screen. Per the municipal code, the site requires 15 parking spaces, and that's based on the 4 per 1,000 rate for retail establishments. Once completed, the parking lot will feature those 15 parking spaces, and it will have a new bike rack, which is credited as an additional parking space for a total of 16 parking spaces. The applicant proposes to enhance the site by repaving and restriping the parking lot and installing the bike rack. In addition, a new trash enclosure will be constructed, and the existing wall at the rear of the property will be increased to a height of 8 feet to provide additional privacy to the neighboring mobile home park. Substantial landscaping is proposed, including constructing a new wrought iron fence and gate, and it also includes 3 new shade trees, 9 palm trees, and a variety of shrubs and ground cover. The proposed floor plan includes 2 major areas, the retail sales area and the back of house area to support the retail sales operation. The sales area is shown in green here and also includes the check-in lobby. The second floor is entirely dedicated to storage, and there will be no customer foot traffic on the second floor. The facility has 1 public customer entrance and 1 access-controlled entrance and exit for licensed vendors and employees. The cannabis path of travel is shown on the plan with a green line. It goes through a secured courtyard area and then into the receiving area, and then it's distributed to the retail sales area. There is an existing emergency exit at the rear of the building, and that does exit onto the neighboring property at where the mobile home park is located. Other than the public entrance, all other entrances would be locked at all times. As mentioned, the project is within close proximity to residential uses. The parking lot and licensed premises for the project is located within a few feet of the mobile home park located just at the rear of the property. The mobile home park is in a commercial zone, C2, just like the subject property, and that is highlighted in yellow on the screen. The subject property is in green, and the closest residentially zoned property is shown in red. It's approximately 325 feet from the subject property. Staff is proposing specific conditions in order to ensure that there's no undue burden on these residences and the mobile home park, including limiting the business hours from 7 a.m. to 10, ensuring that garbage is only dumped in the trash enclosure from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and limiting the hours of the outdoor break area, which is also the courtyard where deliveries go through, from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. In addition, conditions require that no smoking is allowed and that signs be placed to remind employees to be quiet. And finally, the proposed vehicle gate, it would be required to be closed to customers when the business is not in operation from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. The applicant has provided a detailed business plan that was evaluated by the city's cannabis consultant, HDL. The plan is not attached to the staff report. However, it does include the owner's professional experience, proof of capitalization, pro forma, and information about day-to-day operations. In addition, the applicant also provided a professionally prepared security plan, which has been vetted by HDL, and they determined that appropriate security measures were included to address the city and state requirements. Some of those measures include 24-hour security, door sensors and alarms, and everything else listed on the slide. In addition to those aforementioned conditions, there's almost 50 standard conditions of approval related to Measure Q uses. These include that on-site consumption is prohibited, that age restrictions are in place for who can enter the facility, and that the facility must comply with all state regulations and city regulations by obtaining a CBP as needed. With that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to find the project categorically exempt from CEQA and to approve the planning application subject to the conditions of approval and code requirements. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for questions, and the applicants have also prepared a presentation of their own.
All right, thank you, Mr. Yeager, appreciate it. Commissioner Vivar.
All right, Mr. Yeager, thank you so much for your presentation. Just a couple of things here. So I believe that the application for this retail cannabis storefront was received in August of 2021. And so seeing as the chiropractor business left in 2022, do we know if they relocated elsewhere in city, or not sure about that?
I am aware they did relocate into another location in Costa Mesa, yes.
Oh, okay. So as for the vehicle gate, so you did confirm it's closed between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. because I think there was a typo in the staff report that said it was that this gate would be open, closed between 10 and 7.
Yes, I noticed that typo right before the meeting as I was reading the report again. And yes, the condition does state that it should remain closed from 10 a.m. to 7 a.m.
Okay. So I did notice there's a condition limiting the hours of the use of the outdoor patio area, which would be for employees of the retail storefront. So what I'm wondering is, because I think that condition is trying to limit noise from that area, would like employee gatherings at that area be prohibited, say employee parties or little gatherings that they're, you know, with music and food and whatever? Would that kind of thing be prohibited from happening in that patio area?
As currently proposed, the conditions placed on the project by staff include the signage reminding employees to stay quiet, that no smoking should be allowed in that area, and that it not be used during those hours mentioned. If you felt appropriate to add additional conditions, you'd be welcome to.
Okay. But so basically that means that employee gatherings wouldn't necessarily be prohibited.
I would assume it would be used as just a break area while people are taking their breaks, but you may want to confer with the applicants when they come up to the stand. Okay, I can't remember what part of the staff report this was in, but
I read what seemed to be kind of conflicting guidance regarding or conditions regarding the monitoring of the parking area. There was a section that said that the staff or the 24-hour security personnel would make sure that the noise coming from the parking area was kept to a low, and it said that this monitoring would be especially diligent during morning and evening hours. But then I believe a later section of the report says that only periodic monitoring of the parking lot would be required. So it just seemed a bit like mutually exclusive. So I'm not sure which of these is part of the actual condition of the project. And forgive me for not remembering where exactly it is. I think they might even be in different parts of the report.
Sure. So the condition placed on the project as proposed by staff reads that a staff person shall be required to periodically monitor the exterior, including the parking lot, especially during the evening, to ensure customers and vendors are using consideration, i.e. abiding by the parking lot signs as conditioned in cannabis business permit condition number 7 when entering or leaving the business. So that is the condition as proposed.
And so the language about the monitoring being especially diligent during morning or afternoon or morning or evening hours isn't necessarily part of this condition language then, is that correct?
Not as a part of that condition. I'm going to scan through and see if it was placed elsewhere.
Yeah, I can't remember. I think it might have been the section that talks about the like sensitive uses, and it talks about the fact that residential is not a sensitive use per se, but that that staff takes special precautions with storefronts proposed adjacent to residential.
So yeah, you were correct, Commissioner Vivar, your memory served you well. The last bullet point says a staff person or the required 24-hour security guard will monitor the site's parking area. So that condition reflects that the staff person will, but the assumption is that the 24-hour security guard would also monitor that. There would be both.
Right.
So there'd be some redundancy if needed.
And that section you found, does that say that part about especially diligent that I'm kind of thinking of?
Yeah, of course. The parking lot monitoring will be especially diligent to prevent noise and other neighboring disturbances during morning and evening business hours.
Right. But so that's in our staff report, but not necessarily in the condition, right?
That staff report says a staff person or the required 24-hour security guard. But you're correct with regards to the especially diligent is not there.
Condition number 27 on page 17 is what I think he's referring to.
That's correct. And in that condition, it only refers to the evening.
Only to the evening?
Yes. So that could be a modification if you felt necessary to throw morning in there as well.
Okay. I thought the thing said afternoon or morning and afternoon, but it might have just said evening. But yeah, thank you for pointing that out, Commissioner Zick. As for my comments, the other thing I noticed is when I did a site visit today, the building didn't seem to be two-story. I didn't see any windows that seemed to indicate there was a second story. So is the second story being created or added onto the building, or is it existing but it has no windows?
Great question. So when the building was originally constructed in the 70s, there was a alcove in the roof for mechanical equipment. When it was remodeled, that area was turned into a storage space and it was covered with a roof. So there's no windows to the second floor. It's kind of just a walled-in storage area.
And so that would remain a storage area for the proposed retail cannabis storefront?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I think that's it. Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation and for your staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Vivar. Anyone else? Commissioner Zick.
So I just wanted to say, Mr. Yeager, that I do not have any questions, but it's a result of your comprehensive analysis and the clarity of your report. I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Andrade.
Just for some clarity, for my better understanding of our code here, what is the purpose of the 24-hour security guard? Like, what's the goal? I know, kind of mentioned monitor the parking lot, but if the gates are closed, I mean, what's the goal with the 24-hour security?
Predominantly, the security for 24 hours is that when there is no use of the site and it still has some of the inventory that nobody would break in during that time. So basically, the security guard would try to prevent that as a potential to try to restrict that. Yeah, that in itself would prevent somebody from breaking in.
Breaking in or like a major robbery. So, yeah, I mean, just because considering, I understand that the mobile homes are not, you know, zoned as residential, but they are residential. I actually went to a birthday party there in that area. So I know that although it's not, again, we talked about lack of green space in our community on the west side. Kids and children are playing in the tiny little patches of green space, and you know the loop around in mobile homes. You know, kids make good use creatively of it. So I understand it's not officially a park. It's not officially a playground. It's not officially residential, but this is what we're bringing right against their homes. 24-hour surveillance in the event that there is like a major break-in. So that to me is really concerning. I know, again, a lot of my daughter's classmates live in this area, so it's kind of a red flag. So, but again, I understand the code is written a certain way, so there's some limitations. I would love to see, you know, with that in mind, knowing that this is going to be right up to homes. What is the existing wall, the height of the wall right now? Like, is it already 8 feet, or is this going to be higher than what it's currently shown in the picture?
The existing wall is approximately 5.5 to 6 feet in height.
Okay. So that 8 feet is kind of a standard to kind of give some protection and added security for the homes that this is going to be right against abutting. So that's good to know. I mean, I don't know if there's any other kind of protections along the wall or maybe beautifying as I'm looking at the applicant's design. Maybe include some, you know, some little green space or some, you know, livelihood along that wall that now these residents, you know, are gonna have to face by, you know, a business that's coming into where they are already established. And also, I think another concern would be just the noise, and maybe considering what would be a good recommendation from the city to for limiting hours, because I know we talked about limiting the hours for delivery and things of the sort, but being open at is it 7 a.m. correct? Again, that's busy drop-off time and people leaving to work, kids and families getting delivered to school, dropped off at schools and stuff like that. So what has been a good example maybe of another similar CUP that has been so close to homes?
Yeah, there has been various conditions that are required for these projects with regards to timing and their adjacency to residential. One of them I can recall that might work well here is during the evening hours, the parking lot can be used closer towards Newport Boulevard for customers, and then and basically maybe cone off the spaces are closer and adjacent to it until the parking's needed, or require that the employees park in those spaces that are adjacent to the wall. That can often improve the adjacency between a residential and a commercial use.
Okay, so that kind of creates some distance, is what you're saying, creates a good buffer, having
Correct.
employees park along the back wall and limiting customers to the front side of the parking lot. How about hours of operation?
There has been various operation hours. The code allows for the timing that they're proposing to do. Some of the applicants have requested lesser hours. Staff hasn't really got into requiring hours on a lot of the applications. On several we have, though, when they are adjacent to residential. So it is something that we have done in a certain situation. I can remember on the Cabrillo one, there was some very specific requirements for parking, for hours of operation.
I believe it was like 10 a.m., right, or something like that?
Yeah, yes, correct. Or less, that's what staff was proposing. I think what ended up was something different than what staff proposed.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to maybe see if that could be a recommendation for this application, just again, considering it's right abutting to residential homes. 7 a.m. is a busy traffic for the families that are circulating in that area. So maybe considering limiting the opening hours of the store.
Sure, I think that you could bring that up with the applicant, and you'd also could discuss that among the commission. One thing worth mentioning is that it is in the C2 zone. The zone is allowed for commercial activities. It has obviously operated as a chiropractic use before, which may be a lesser demand than what's being proposed currently. But that's something that's been considered in previous applications as well, and as formulating conditions to reduce timing. So that's not out of line per se for what we've done in the past.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Andrade. Anyone else? All right. I guess one question from me, Mr. Yeager, Director Dropkin. What were the hours of operation for the previous use? Do we know that?
We do not have that information, and nothing in the code would stop a chiropractic office from operating any hours that they wanted.
Yeah, and I understand that. I think in previous cases, we've asked similar questions about what neighbors can expect based on the previous use that was in there versus what's being proposed. So if we have an idea of what they're used to, then we can kind of better understand what some of those potential concerns might be. So I don't know if we can get that by the time we...
I'll look.
Okay, thank you, Director. And with that, that's all for me. Anyone else? Commissioner Rojas? Okay, all right. All right, thank you, Mr. Yeager. We appreciate it. I will now open the public hearing and ask the applicant or the applicant's representative to come up. And if you would, please state your name for the record and let us know if you've read the staff report and the conditions of approval, and do you agree?
The conditions of approval, and we do agree.
Great.
My name is Renat Abdullah. I'm the representative and general counsel for Strains. I'm here with my brother, Wade Abdullah, who is our director of operations. On behalf of the Strains team, I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for all your time considering and reviewing our application, and I'd also like to thank Chris Yeager for his presentation and for his assistance and working with us on the details. I'd like to start off by introducing the Strains team and telling you a little bit about our experience in the cannabis industry. Next slide, please. Strains is a vertically integrated cannabis company with cultivation, distribution, and retail cannabis licenses. We have a 22,000 square foot indoor cultivation facility in Adelanto, California, where we cultivate our own award-winning Strains brand flower, which allows us to control the quality of our product as well as allow us to offer it at reasonable prices at our licensed retail store in Paris, California. Next slide, please. Our leadership team, the owner and founder, Abe Abdullah, who is our father and mentor, immigrated to this country at the age of 16 and has been a business owner since the age of 22. Abe built and operated successful restaurants, organic farms, and other businesses in Southern California for the last 40 years. Abe entered the cannabis industry in 2016 and was awarded one of the state's first licenses for cultivation. He is 100% owner-operator of strains. Wade Abdullah, as mentioned, is Director of Operations and has served as Marketing Officer and supervised business operations at Strains Paris and the cultivation facility in Adelanto. Celine Gutierrez is our store manager in Strains Paris, and she will be helping us open up in Costa Mesa should we move forward and implement our already successfully established procedures. We are a family-based model. Our employees feel like part of a big family, and our customers trust our services and products, and we've established long-term relationships with vendors and customers. We're well-reviewed on Weed Maps and Google at a 4.9 star rating. Next slide, please. The proposed location is at 2013 Newport Boulevard, as mentioned. Our remodel plans conform with the Costa Mesa General Plan. We will have environmentally friendly building upgrades with updated landscape, including drought-tolerant plants. The location is pedestrian, transit, and bicycle friendly, and we will be installing bike racks, also as mentioned, and our parking lot allows for easy vehicle flow. Next slide, please. Our day-to-day operations are based on our standard operating procedures, which have been developed and updated regularly to make regulatory changes with professional CPAs, legal and other compliance consultants, as well as input from management based on best practices in the industry. The SOPs cover everything from inventory control, quality testing, cash management, cannabis storage, tracking products from seed to sale in the state's metric system, customer check-in, and safety and fire plans. Next slide, please. Our security plan ensures the safety and well-being of our customers, our employees, and our surrounding community. Our goal is to make not only shopping at Strains safe, but to ensure we prevent any nuisance to neighbors or the public. Our plan has been professionally prepared by a licensed security company, and we've implemented similar procedures at our other licensed locations with zero security issues. We will have security staff present on the premises 24 hours a day. We will have all limited access areas secured to prevent any cannabis diversion. We will have a highly effective camera, alarm, and sensor system that will be monitored 24 hours a day, and we've also prepared a safety and emergency plan with a professional safety consultant. Next slide, please. We anticipate creating about 20 new job openings, which will go to local Costa Mesa residents. Our other locations have about a 95 to 100% local hire rate, with most employees living within a 10-mile radius. We have a high living wage as well as a history of long employee retention through ensuring annual raises and bonuses and an inclusive hiring practice, as well as promoting from within. Next slide, please. Wherever we've done business, we've contributed to local organizations, and we intend to do the same in Costa Mesa. We are currently assessing and will continue to base this on Costa Mesa's highest priorities in terms of community needs. We have a history of regular and ongoing contributions to local food drives, homeless shelters, hospitals, first responders, local police, and fire departments. And we also offer discounts for first responders, veterans, medical patients, and customers over the age of 65. Next slide, please. We want to make sure we're a good neighbor and a respectful neighbor, and to help with this, we will have a community relations liaison available 24 hours a day, and whose contact information will be posted in our store as well as on our website. We've conducted personal door-to-door outreach to this particular community that Commissioner Andrade was referring to, and we were actually very happy to have received nothing but welcoming comments. In addition to, sure, some concerns, but after talking personally to some of the residents, they were actually pleasantly surprised to learn that we will have security staff on the premises, that we will be improving the landscape to enhance the area's appearance. And they were actually also surprised to hear about just how regulated cannabis is. So in closing, we appreciate Costa Mesa's charm, and we intend to be an accountable and responsible member of the community. We see ourselves as ambassadors of the cannabis industry, and we will make every effort to ensure our presence will be a positive one for all our neighbors, both residents and businesses. Thank you again.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Abdullah.
Sure.
Appreciate your time. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Rojas.
You kind of already answered it, but could you go a little bit more in detail of your outreach that you did with the residents there? Just because we didn't have any letters of support or against, so just put a little bit more color on that for us.
Oh, sure. I know that we've spoke to the businesses several times. We've spoken to the manager of the trailer community behind us several times, and then we actually went door to door. My brother and I both went door to door to basically the entire neighborhood. Spoke to everyone who was home, basically.
About how long ago was that?
This was actually, the door-to-door outreach was Saturday. We actually went Saturday. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I wanted. Just wanted some more color. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Rojas. Commissioner Andrade?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question. Yeah, because, normally others, it's always great to see it, or at least have a couple of, right, individuals, residents that are excited about the business to come and share their eagerness to have it, so that we have more than just a statement to go by.
Sure.
I'm sure in your extensive experience in the business, that's always, it's always just helpful to know, because again, we're here representing our local community, so we want to make sure that we're doing right by them. Yeah, I guess that would be one of the, I saw the details that you had there about, making sure the noise and the odor, because I think those are the biggest concerns that I would have for that local community, like anything that you heard from them, and how are you going to make sure that is not an issue?
Yes, we were very clear with every single resident that we spoke to that we're going to have a contact information for the community relations contact available. They're going to be available 24 hours a day. Anything they hear, we've actually talked to the management to allow our security to patrol the area around closing time and before opening. They were actually very excited to hear about that too. In terms of noise, odor, we've run a retail location. We've never had any issues with odor with some of the new technology they have. I can't really explain it. I know it has to do with carbon and the HVAC system, but it does appear to work really well.
Yeah, that's it. And then other than that, again, I appreciate that you're raising the wall to just kind of give a little more distance. I would appreciate your consideration of our Mr. Drapkin's recommendation of maybe create an additional buffer from that wall of like having the employees maybe kind of just park on that back wall so that it's kind of a static kind of buffer that it would create. Just again, anything to protect the children that live in that area.
Absolutely.
Would be great.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Andrade. Anyone else? Commissioner Vivar.
Yeah, just a couple things. Thank you, Ms. Abdullah, for your presentation. Let's see. So I was wondering, what kind of work do you foresee doing on the parking lot?
The parking lot, as far as I know, maybe Wade would be able to talk a little bit more about it, is going to be restriped to allow for the correct number of parking spots.
Will there be repaving work as well, by any chance, or?
Yes, there will be, I believe.
Okay. As for, so in your presentation, you mentioned that this would be bike-friendly, pedestrian-friendly, and transit-friendly. So what do you mean by transit-friendly?
Just in terms of the location, easy walkability to the location.
Because I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of buses that go down Newport, that part of Newport, but I mean, I might be wrong.
I think the nearest one is, I thought, was a couple of blocks away. I couldn't tell you what street,
Okay.
but I don't think it's that far.
Yeah, yeah. Right. And then let's see what else. Oh, you meant you said something about local hiring. So how do you plan to go about advertising positions for your proposed servant?
What we've done in the past is advertise just on the job boards such as Indeed, but we've also held sort of like career fairs and advertised on our Instagram and social media pages, focusing on local hires.
Right, because I'm just kind of curious as to how you end up with such high rates of local hires, because obviously if you advertise on Indeed, you could obviously get anybody from
Obviously,
anywhere.
we have, yes, you're absolutely right. Obviously, we have to, kind of determine best applications before we move on, but yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's see what else. Any questions? And so, as for the outreach, as with other parts of the city that I've seen before, sometimes the homeowners, residents don't have a very good handle on the English language. Did you encounter any situations where you knocked at a Spanish-speaking person's door and had trouble communicating with them in your outreach?
I did not, actually.
Okay. And you didn't send out any mailers, right? You only knocked at their doors?
Yes, we knocked on their doors.
Okay. Last question. So did you identify any local nonprofit organizations or groups that you plan to donate to as part of your?
I have not. We're still assessing, kind of getting to know the area, getting to know the local nonprofit organizations, getting to know, the most pressing needs in the community.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I think that's it for me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Barr. Anyone else? Yeah, Commissioner Andrade.
Sorry, this kind of reminded me of a common question we have for our applicants is on the hiring of local employees. You mentioned in your presentation you have a really great record of paying your employees a livable wage. Is that something you can share? How much that, on average, that is? Or what you would offer here in Costa Mesa. I mean, Paris is great, but we want to know what's happening in Costa Mesa.
Because, and we understand the high cost of living, especially in Costa Mesa. I think our target was at 17, to start at 17 an hour.
Oh, awesome. And will there be an opportunity for employees to allow to unionize?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. I think those are the quick follow-ups that I had.
All right. Thanks for the follow-up. Anyone else? All right. I have a couple questions, Ms. Abdullah. If we can, Anna, pull up the presentation and go to the interior perspectives picture. It's an interior mock-up of the sales area. I know this question might sound a little pithy, but is the idea that your employees are all going to be in business formal attire?
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
No,
It's
I think that
it's
was
a great
just-
picture, though. It's a really, really good picture.
I think our architect just kind of, you know, went with his imagination on this.
Okay, well, he did a great job.
Thank you.
Okay,
I'll
second
let him know.
question. Second question. In your letter, in attachment 2, second page, in your conclusion, you said, Strains trusts that its demonstrated enthusiasm for the community of Costa Mesa and aptitude to make this project a success translates to its worthiness to be awarded a cannabis retailer permit. If I might ask, in what ways have you demonstrated your enthusiasm for this community?
Well, I believe we're actually all very excited to come into this community. Personally, you grew up in the Riverside area. I have been driving down this same stretch on Newport Boulevard since I actually got a driver's license, going to Newport Back Bay with environmental groups, cleanups and whatnot. So we've actually grown up around this area, maybe not inside Costa Mesa, but we're very excited to hopefully be welcomed with open arms into the community.
Okay. Yeah, I guess not to press too much, I just didn't know if you had any current dealings or recent historical dealings in Costa Mesa that
Business dealings?
that would demonstrate that kind of enthusiasm. I didn't know. It was just kind of vague.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, but no business dealings, no recent business dealings of that sort.
All right, Ms. Abdullah, thank you so much. Anyone else have follow-up questions? All right, we'll move it along. Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. I will now open the public hearing. Let's see, I've already done that. Now open for public comments, and if you'd like to speak to this item and you're in chambers, feel free to come to either podium. You'll have 3 minutes. Matt, the floor is all yours. Yeah. And just before you start, I met Matt just before this meeting. It happens that we went to the same university because I saw his shirt.
Good to see a familiar face.
Yeah,
That's right.
sure. The floor is yours, sir.
Well, yeah, thank y'all for having me. I probably won't speak as long as you guys did. You went very thorough on everything tonight, which is awesome to see. I'm glad to see y'all working for my city. I've been living here about 8 years with my wife, who also went to South Carolina. And as a resident, I think the people of Costa Mesa deserve safe access from a professional business that really wants to care and give back to their community. And as a resident that also consumes cannabis, I want to keep my money here. This is clearly a professional organization. The vertical integration is something that makes me more comfortable as a consumer to hear. A location that's going to clean up the parking lot and make everything more aesthetically pleasing, add a bike rack, which I love to hear as somebody that rides my bike everywhere and is very close to this location. I see this as a worthy business to be part of the Costa Mesa community. I've been to dispensaries and other places that just do not care what they're doing. They don't care what the businesses around them or the community around them is getting into. These folks obviously have a plan together to make that happen. They're going to add jobs to the area. They're going to add tax revenue to the area, safe access. I think this is a good opportunity for the city and for these folks as well. So I'm just here to show my support. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, sir. And go Gamecocks. All right. Seeing no one else in chambers, Anna, do we have anyone online or on the phone?
No, we do not, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you. Going to close the public comment portion of the public hearing. And commissioners, do you have any further questions for the applicant? For the applicant. For the applicant. Okay, seeing none. Does the applicant have any closing comments, Ms. Abdullah? No? Okay. All right, commissioners, do you have any further questions for staff? Okay, Commissioner Andrade.
Yeah, I wanted to just check in to see if staff was able to kind of figure out what was that kind of recommended reduction of hours that we did for that other dispensary that was really close to homes. Or the previous business, I think we were also looking up.
For the Cabrillo project, there was, it changed, so it kind of went through a growth. What they ended up with, I believe, was 9 to 8, but that was what they requested, as I recall. So most of the times, now that I'm thinking a little bit more, it's usually been with regards to times, most of the times that are being proposed were generally proposed by the applicants. We did figure out what the existing times were for the chiropractic business, and it included, we went on a couple websites that showed the hours. It was generally from 9 to 6 p.m., but there was some other variations where they were closed on Thursday and they were open on Tuesday from 11:30 to 1:30. But it was generally from, one of them was from, one of them actually even said 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So that was one of the, it was all across the board on the website. Their existing current hours at their revised location is 9 to 6 p.m. daily though. So we're getting a whole lot of them.
Yeah.
I tried, but I tried. So.
Yeah, no, thank you. And then, you know, I normally have a good Google map here on my phone to look at distance, but, you know, as we were earlier in our discussion about the general plan, we were talking about how just recently it was announced that the Travel Lodge just down the road is going to be permanent supportive housing as part of Project Home Key. I don't know how far into the future we can look into or kind of project, right? I don't know exactly what the distance would be.
With regards to your concerns of that being a sensitive use, it would have to have been approved before the application was submitted. So that doesn't, the code doesn't allow for us to consider a post-approval.
Post-approval of the location of the new.
Correct.
The housing support.
The Home Key project.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? Any further questions for staff? All right, seeing none, I will now close the public hearing and entertain a motion, Commissioners. Motion made by Commissioner Andrade.
Yes. You know, again, looking at the incompatible land use here, I know that, again, it's not technically a park or a playground or residential, but people live there. Children live there and play in there. So I'm concerned about the vicinity of just being right next to residential area. You know, one of our charges are to protect the use of our, you know, how we approve these conditional projects. So, and the encroachment into, you know, the land use that's existing at the moment, which again is homes. So I would propose a reduction of hours from similar to the business that was there before and similar to other conditional use permits that we've approved of 9 to 8 p.m.
And that's your motion? Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Vivar. Let's see, Commissioner Vivar.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I mean, I guess I'll just ask the maker of the motion, Commissioner Andrade, if this would be in perpetuity or if you would like to revisit this in, say, 6 months or something and see if the hours of operation could be, for example, extended if there seemed to be no issue with noise, because we considered that in the past for a project, but that never came to fruition. But that's always also a possibility as well.
So just to be clear, Commissioner Vivar, your ask of the maker of the motion is to approve the truncated hours of operation, but revisit this item in 6 months for review. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
if she agrees, and if not, then that's fine too. I'll still support the motion.
Okay. Commissioner Andrade?
I think that, the applicant, in good faith, I think it's maybe worthwhile to give the applicant that opportunity to come back in 6 months and maybe consider it. And I think also to keep it standard, I think it would be great to keep it standard of how we've done with other applications. So I'm okay with that.
Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and make an alternate motion to approve this planning application as written. Is there a second? I don't know if we need to clear the board, Anna, so I can make the motion. Okay. Is there a second? Seconded by Toller. All right. I'll try to make this brief. We have had similar instances where the proximity to residential has raised various concerns. I can think of the one that's by Triangle Square on Harbor Boulevard. I can think of Cabrillo. I can think of the one that's on Newport Boulevard. I can think of several, even going to the one that we outright denied on Bristol Street for similar reasons. But what's different about this is that the residential is behind the subject property, and where I might have had misgivings about certain projects in terms of the circularity, in terms of traffic around a residential area, I don't have that concern here because it's one-way traffic right off of Newport Boulevard. The fact that the walls are being raised a couple feet, if I'm not mistaken, it's going up to 8 feet, would very much mitigate the sound that's taking place. And seeing as how we've approved other applications of a similar nature, I don't see any reason to further limit their hours of operation for this potential impact because it seems to be much less than what we've seen before. So my motion will be to find that the project is categorically exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA per CEQA Guidelines, Section 15301, Class 1 Existing Facilities, and approve planning application 22-07 subject to the conditions of approval. Just to clarify that point. Vice Chair Toller, would you like to speak to the motion?
Sure, real quick. I like the idea of limiting hours. I respect that in thinking about the neighbors, and I liked Commissioner Vivar's idea of giving them 6 months and coming back. But ultimately, we have so many similar projects, and I'm concerned about being consistent about these. I get nervous about using governmental power to mess with businesses and putting this applicant at a disadvantage with their competitors. I don't feel comfortable about doing that. Also, as the chair mentioned, 8-foot wall. This is on Newport Boulevard. And these guys, it's obviously a professional applicant that we have here. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to the alternate motion? Commissioner Zick.
I'll be supporting this substitute motion. I'll speak to the issue at hand at the end, but what I wanted to first commend you for is your community outreach. The fact that we don't have people here lined up to say they don't like you moving in next to them is a testament to that community outreach. If a bunch of people showed up and said they love the fact you're moving in, I'd probably be surprised since they not necessarily have had a chance to be a customer yet. Your community outreach, I think, paid off as evidenced by the attendance here. I'm impressed with the professionalism of your business plan and the experience that you've laid out. The vertical integration is also something that impressed me. You have complete control, or it appears to be that, but none of that weighs into whether I would approve your application or not. Those are things that just impressed me beyond the criteria that you have to meet, which I feel you have met for an approval. I like the way you characterized your intention to engage with the community by talking about trying to first understand the community's most pressing needs. We're not here to blackmail businesses and say, well, yeah, you can come in here and conduct business, or what do we get out of it? I think just by existing and being a successful business, we get benefit. We're not looking for contributions beyond that. I'm certainly not. What I am sensitive to, though, and what I appreciate is those things that you were mentioning as potential examples were all adult-oriented community needs. You're not targeting our youth. You didn't sound like you had a marketing plan for our youth, and you might appreciate that that's a particular concern and interest to me. So I liked your approach to that. I thought the question about your claims for demonstrated enthusiasm of the community was appropriate. And I'll tell you why. Because it factors into the credibility of everything else you say. You know, if I believe 99% of what you say, but then you make a claim that is just completely unbelievable and lacks credibility, then it calls into question everything else you said. But I thought your answer to the question, I think, adequately answered the question in my mind. Your familiarity with the community, the adjacency to where you have spent time. Again, none of that to me qualifies you or disqualifies you for approval, but I thought it was a very appropriate question. I thought your answer was also appropriate. With regard to this hours of operation, clearly the zoning of the commercial use gives you the right to those hours of operation. But our concern about adjacencies to sensitive uses is also a legitimate concern. However, when our ordinance was put in place by City Council, it was after there was extensive consideration of what sensitive uses were going to be considered and codified. The state dictates some, but the city had the option of putting in others. Proximity to residential was not one of those that was specific in the ordinance. But your proximity to residents is a legitimate concern that we look at. But there's a difference between, to me, the physical juxtaposition of your business to the residential and what other businesses that have been more concerning. People would have to completely walk all the way around your building to even see your customers arriving to the parking lot, going into the building, leaving the parking lot. The other situations that we looked at were different. I'm not concerned about the hours of operation for your business and the impact. You were right on Newport Boulevard. There is no busier, louder place in the city to be conducting business. Another location that we'd considered and had concerns about residents was essentially it was a mixed use area, but it was like literally across what you might consider a residential street. And it was completely different set of circumstances than yours. So I support the motion. I just like to explain my thinking behind it, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Zick. Would anyone else like to speak to the substitute motion? All right, let's bring it up for a vote.
That motion carries 5-1 with Commissioner Andrade voting no.
Okay, thank you, Anna. That decision is final unless appealed to the City Council within 7 days. Good luck. Thank you. All right, that brings us to old business. There's no old business or new business, so that brings us to departmental reports, starting with our famous Mr. Yang. Mr. Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Honorable members of the Planning Commission, the Public Works report is just kind of repeat what Vice Chair Toller has mentioned earlier in his comments, is that we have a community meeting for the Fairview Road, which is scheduled for this Wednesday on June 28th between the hours of 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. It's an opportunity for members of the community to discuss with their opinions on the improvements on Fairview Road between Fair Drive to Newport Boulevard. So we welcome everyone to join us, and that's it for comments from Public Works. So I defer back to the chair.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Yang, and thank you again for joining us this evening. Development Services report, but we have Ms. Lee here, or Director Lee here this evening, if you'd like to give the report.
Thank you. I just wanted to briefly mention, as this commission knows, you participated in a joint study session with the council regarding the inclusionary housing ordinance recently. We are planning to have our second round of joint study sessions regarding that topic in the month of July. Our tentative date is July 11th for that study session. But we're still finalizing the date, so I'll still call that tentative, but we are hoping to have that discussion in July and move this conversation forward. So we'll give you more information as soon as we have it. And I thank you for participating in those discussions. It's a very critical issue for the city moving forward.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Lee. I'll just comment real quick in saying, notwithstanding any time restrictions or deadlines we have to move this forward, I would recommend the week after, if possible, if that still works with your schedule. Otherwise, we can do whatever you think is best. Okay. All right. Mr. Preziosi for the City Attorney's report.
No report this evening, Chair Arath.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Preziosi. All right. I'll now adjourn the meeting, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us.
This has